The water is so still, it's like time itself has taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. You're floating just above it, barely a ripple beneath you, barely a sound. The ocean stretches in every direction, black and unknowable, like an unlit hallway in a house you've never been inside. You're not swimming, you're drifting, and something is waiting below. There are places in the ocean where sound bends, where compasses spin, where cold water runs warm, and the silence feels inhabited. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, that's not really your problem right now. You're just here to listen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And while you're at it, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Let's see how far these mysteries travel. Because from trench to tide pool, from your room to the bottom of the sea, we're about to follow the ripple of something unexplained. Something that's been watching or waiting for longer than we've been measuring time. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. You start near the western slope of the Mariana Trench, and right away, the laws of physics politely ask you to stop paying attention. There's a sound down here, a tone faint but deliberate. In 2016, researchers dropped a string of hydrophones, basically deep-sea microphones, into the trench to listen to what the ocean normally hides. They were expecting background noise, the low groan of shifting pressure, maybe a whale in the distance singing a song that sounds more like a plumbing issue than music. What they recorded instead was different. It started with a rising tone, musical, mechanical, almost like an alarm clock filtered through fog. 5-second intervals, then nothing. Silence. For 12 minutes it held that rhythm, then gone. They called it echo loop. But not because it echoed. No, because 18 hours later, it returned. Identical. Same waveform. Same tone. Same 5-second intervals. Only this time, it wasn't just coming from the same spot. It hadn't drifted. It hadn't risen. It hadn't even moved. That's weird. The ocean is rarely still. Things float. Currents pull. But this tone, it stayed, like it was anchored not in space, but in time. Researchers checked and rechecked. No ships in range, no seismic events, no whales. Just that sound. Then silence. Then 2 minutes before that recording even began, hydrophones farther north picked up a faint echo of the exact same sound. Did you catch that? The echo arrived before the sound itself. A reverse delay. A ripple running backward through time. Like something was answering itself before it even spoke. Historians still debate whether sound can truly travel like this. Whether we're misunderstanding underwater acoustics, or whether we've accidentally tapped into something else entirely. Some claim it's a trick of overlapping current layers. Others avoid the question. But the researchers, they kept listening. On the third deployment, they added a test beacon, just a normal ping every 20 seconds. You've probably heard one before in a submarine movie. Bloop, bloop, bloop. This one never came back. The loop stayed. But now there was something new, a second rhythm. Faint, offbeat, like someone joining a metronome with a wooden spoon on a kitchen counter. Not angry, not rushed, just there, listening, answering. They called off further dives, just packed up and left. Sometimes you don't need a threat, just something that refuses to follow the rules. One scientist said it felt like listening to an echo trying to find itself. Another wouldn't talk about it at all. The data was clean, triple checked, verified. But sometimes, clean data means dirty implications. The ocean has always had its stories, but this one, it has a rhythm. It repeats. It remembers. And it's still down there answering. There's something soothing about a spiral, isn't there? A seashell, a galaxy, the curl of a fern. It feels natural, inevitable, like the universe is whispering, turn here and keep turning. So when you drift over a massive spiral carved directly into the seafloor, your mind wants to find peace in it. But this one isn't peaceful. It isn't natural. And the ocean around it is holding its breath. It was first discovered by a deep-sea drone just off the Philippine basin. The drone wasn't searching for anything dramatic, just mapping sediment textures for a long-term monitoring program. You know, sand rock, maybe a crab or two. Instead, it sent back something else. Something too smooth, too perfect. A spiral, wide, deliberate, half a mile across, etched into the silt like a signature. One continuous groove, narrowing inward with hypnotic precision, as if drawn by a hand that never wavered. And there were no tracks, no lead-in, no exit trail, just the spiral. It hadn't been dragged by a creature. It hadn't been shaped by current. It didn't even look like it had been disturbed at all. It was just there, still, impossibly still. Now, grooves in the ocean floor aren't unheard of. Underwater landslides can leave sweeping arcs, and sea creatures can trace beautiful patterns through sediment. But this one was different. The depth of the groove was consistent, too deep for soft-bodied animals. And the curvature followed the Fibonacci sequence. Remember that the spiral math you see in hurricanes and pine cones and snail shells. And yes, even in the layout of galaxies. The golden ratio, nature's favorite template. But this didn't feel like nature. It felt designed. Too perfect. Like a symbol, not a shape. When the team ran the coordinates again, a few weeks later, they noticed something unsettling. The spiral hadn't degraded. No shift, no crumbling, no softening of the edges. In fact, it looked sharper, as if something had returned and traced over it. No debris around it, no scattered sediment, nothing that would suggest movement, just a refreshed spiral. Like someone quietly tidying up a chalkboard when no one's looking. A dive crew was sent to get a closer look. They dropped slowly, keeping lights low and thrusters silent. And when they hovered over the spiral center, every one of them said the same thing. The pressure changed. Now, pressure at depth is a constant. It weighs on you evenly from all sides, steady, suffocating, predictable. But here, it dropped. Not like surfacing. Not like a bubble rising. More like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Stillness inside chaos. One diver said it felt like the ocean wasn't pushing in anymore. Like something deeper had pulled space apart and made room for whatever this was. And then came the whisper. Not a sound exactly. A sensation. A vibration in the ribs like a bass speaker 2 floors away. Low, slow, impossible to locate. Some suggested thermal venting. That's often the go-to for weird underwater phenomena. Hot water creates strange currents, throws off instruments. But there were no temperature shifts, no gas bubbles, no signs of vent life. Just the spiral, the silence, and the sense of waiting. One diver, who later declined to be interviewed publicly, left a single note in her audio log. She didn't describe the shape. She didn't mention the math. Just a few shaken words: it was made through the sand. Not in it. Like something surfaced, turned once, and sank. Historians still debate whether the spiral is natural or manufactured, whether it's the result of magnetism geology or something else. Some want to believe it's an ancient communication signal, a glyph, a signature left by something that only surfaces once every few centuries. But what draws that pattern? What waits at its center? No one stayed long enough to find out. A few months later, another team passed over the same coordinates. The spiral was gone. Well, mostly gone. The groove was still visible, but faint. Weathered. Faded like an old scar. But something new had appeared, a second spiral, smaller offset just slightly from the original. Like a child stepping inside their parents' footprints, learning how to walk the same path. And this one, it didn't follow the Fibonacci sequence. It followed no pattern at all. Irregular, lopsided, incomplete, like something was practicing. They didn't go back. What's left now is just data, photos, a few shaky videos, and the growing sense that the ocean has patterns we aren't meant to interrupt. After all, spirals don't end. They only narrow. And this one might still be turning. The ocean isn't supposed to have rivers. That's a land thing, streams trickling through valleys, cutting through rock, over millennia, dragging fallen leaves and gossip from one side of the continent to the other. But here, in the depths, near the Gulf of Mexico, the ocean bends the rules. And as you drift lower, you realize something impossible is happening. A river is flowing inside the sea. No, really. A winding, slithering current of water, visibly different from the rest. Denser, heavier, darker. It curls along the ocean floor, like a serpent made of mercury liquid silver in a world of blue. And when you hover near it, you feel the difference in your bones. Locals call it La Rente Cano Rega, the current that does not return. They've avoided it for generations. No fishing lines dropped, no nets cast, no anchors dragged. Not because of superstition, but because quite simply it swallows things. Scientifically, it's known as a brine pool, a pocket of hypersaline water, so salty, so heavy, it doesn't mix with the seawater above it. Instead, it sinks and hugs the seafloor. It should sit still, like a bowl of syrup at the bottom of a tub. But this one? It moves. It flows. It remembers where it came from. It pours between underwater cliffs and over submerged ledges. It splits around ancient boulders and folds back into itself. And it's warm, too warm for its depth. That's the first red flag. Down here, things are supposed to get colder. But this river, it carries heat like it passed through fire on its way in. In 2009, a remote-operated vehicle, an ROV, was tasked with following it upstream. It was a sleek little machine, packed with lights and sensors designed to move slowly, methodically, curiously. The crew, on the surface, watched as it skimmed just above the brine's surface, tracing the smooth gleam like a bloodhound on a scent. The deeper it followed the stranger it got. First, the cameras began ghosting blips, distortions, a half-second delay. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to feel like the feed was being filtered through something, thicker than water. The compass on the ROV started hesitating, then flicking sideways, then freezing entirely. Pressure gauges trembled, shook, steadied. then twitched again. And then came the drop, a sudden cliff in the terrain. No warning. The river poured into it like a waterfall descending into a cave that didn't appear on sonar. The brine flowed in like it had always known the way. The ROV hesitated for a second, then followed. The lights caught only the first few meters. Beyond that, it was darkness. Not black water, just black absence. The tether, feeding back to the ship, stayed tense, dragging slightly recording pressure until it stopped. No scream, no surge, just silence. Contact was lost. No signal, no return. What did come back weeks later was strange. A soft rhythmic sound, a humming-like breath filtered through a broken flute. It came from the audio cache embedded in the ROV's last ping. Not mechanical, not marine, just present. Like something had folded the signal and handed it back politely, but altered. Scientists will tell you this is normal. Equipment fails. Salt corrodes. Wires tangle. The sea eats machines the way fire eats wood, but fishermen, they already knew. They'd seen the river. They'd felt it under their hulls. They knew it was a path, not a destination. Some say it's the runoff from something deeper. Something beneath the seabed moving in spirals that don't match our maps. Others whisper that it isn't a river at all, but a scar. A place where the sea was wounded long ago, and now it bleeds salt and heat and memory. Historians still debate whether the first reports of this phenomenon came from indigenous myths or Spanish explorers. But the truth is older than either. The current flows even now. It hasn't stopped. Fish that enter it are rarely seen again. Submersibles that cross its edge often flicker, groan, or report nothing at all. Some come back with new scratches on their hulls, some with hulls a little warmer than they should be. And sometimes, just sometimes, you'll hear a soft knock on the hull of a passing boat, a knock that repeats, not like tapping, more like walking. The ocean is not metaphorical. It doesn't speak in riddles, but sometimes it leaves the truth behind, floating just above a river that shouldn't exist. You watch the brine shimmer beneath you. You think you see something move inside it. A branch, maybe. A tail. A shape. And then nothing. It keeps flowing, and the sea, as always, keeps its secrets warm. You're 20 meters down, suspended in blue, watching two divers below you descend like tiny shadows into a halo of heat. The water churns gently around them, not violently, not alarmingly. Just enough to remind you that something is breathing beneath. They're here to investigate a volcanic vent, one of many scattered across the seabed like scars. The vent is shallow, maybe 30 meters deep, and it belches heat and minerals into the ocean like a slow-burning exhale. It's not supposed to be dangerous. A routine dive. But one of them won't come back. You're watching now, through a cracked helmet camera salvaged days later. The footage flickers dips in and out of color. The timestamp pauses occasionally, as if the ocean is trying to remember what it just saw. The two divers hover near the vent. You see them flash. OK signs adjust their tethers, begin to descend further. The water turns from blue to gray, then gray to rust. The vent pulses softly below them, like a giant eye opening and closing in slow rhythm. Then one diver turns toward the camera and freezes. Something has touched him. At first, there's nothing. Just bubbles rising his eyes wide behind the visor, hand twitching toward his partner. Then there it is. A hand. Not his. Not his partner's. Not a hand in the human sense, but a limb, long, sinuous, thin as a whip reaching upward from the vent, like it's searching, exploring, tasting the water. It isn't fast, it isn't even threatening, but it's vast, longer than a man's body, smooth, iridescent, almost beautiful. Then it's gone. The diver jerks upward, scrambling his flippers, stirring up clouds of black sediment. His partner looks around wildly, and you can hear, yes, through the suit mic, a faint whimper. Not from fear, from confusion, from the shock of seeing something that shouldn't exist. Then the camera cuts to static. When they pulled the surviving diver aboard, he didn't speak. Not for hours, then not for days. Eventually, someone pried a few words out of him. Something looked at me, he said. It wasn't angry, just old. That was all. The team reviewed the footage. Again and again, frame by frame. They couldn't explain it. The anomaly in the water wasn't heat distortion. It had texture, movement, intention. But it wasn't in any marine biology database. Not jellyfish, not eel, not known. Historians still debate whether the footage was altered. Some say it's a trick of the light optical illusion under stress. Others insist it's proof of unknown life in geothermal vents, life older than the surface. You can believe whichever you want. But then there's the second anomaly. 5 days later, the vent went cold. Just stopped. No heat, no emissions, no vibrations. The seabed around it hardened. The ground turned glassy, and every fish in a 10-meter radius vanished. Not swam away, vanished. Like the sea had closed a curtain and pretended none of it had ever happened. The diving team was disbanded. The remaining diver quit his job and moved inland. Landlocked. No lakes, no rivers, just plains. He keeps his lights on at night. The footage was filed, then scrubbed, then quietly leaked. You can still find it if you know what forum to visit, but no one has dived that vent again. And new satellite scans show the entire ridge where it stood is shifting as if the land beneath is being peeled from the inside. Some say the oceans are the Earth's lungs. Others say they're its memory. But this feels more like a dream the planet had a long time ago. 1. It suddenly remembered. The diver's last recorded words, before the camera cuts off completely, are faint, warped by static. But if you listen closely, if you really lean in, you'll hear it. Something's coming up. Then silence. And that silence, it's still there. The vent never reopened. But the currents around it, they've started to spiral. You drift above a patch of ocean that doesn't appear on maps. It's not particularly deep or wide, just a quiet stretch of water off the coast of New Zealand, marked by nothing more than a faint thermal blur on a satellite scan. The locals call it Te Iti, the quiet place. But researchers call it something else, something less poetic, more ominous. They call it the drop. It's not a trench, not a fissure, not a geological formation at all, really. Just a stretch of sea that refuses to behave. Fish won't cross it. Birds don't fly above it. Boats drift over it only once and never again. And those who floated above its center all report the same thing: silence. A silence so complete it feels manufactured. Back in 2002, a survey team dropped a series of deep-sea probes into the area to measure salinity and pressure gradients. Standard stuff. Routine. You could practically do it half asleep. But the probes never came back. Or rather, they did. Sort of. One by one, each device returned to the surface, not where they were dropped, but miles away, and not intact. They were warped, bent, twisted in subtle ways as though they'd been subjected to forces not of pressure, but of intent. And on the outer casing of each probe, etched into the titanium like a signature, was a series of symbols. No corrosion, no scraping, no cutting. Just marks. Too smooth to be etched by tools. Too intricate to be random. One looked like an eye, another like a key, the third a spiral. Yeah, that again. The ocean has patterns, but this place makes you feel like the ocean has preferences. Then came the dead fish. On the sixth drop, the probe returned, accompanied by a dozen fish floating upward, with it perfectly preserved as if frozen in place. Their bodies were limp, but their eyes were wide. Too wide. Not like the vacant gaze of decay, but like the freeze frame of panic. Every one of them caught mid-motion mouths, slightly open fins extended, as if they'd been stopped in the middle of swimming. The biologists called it a localized freezing event, though none could explain how the fish had been frozen without their bodies actually freezing. Their temperatures were normal, their tissues intact. No trauma, just paused. And the weirdest part, their shadows were gone. You don't usually think of fish having shadows in the deep, but under strong light, every creature casts something. These didn't. No matter how bright the lamp, no shadow stuck to them. Like their presence had been scrubbed from the geometry of space. Then came the metal. On the final mission, one of the researchers, a woman named Dr. Eva Chan, insisted on hand-collecting samples. She lowered herself in a suit built for cryogenic zones, tethered tight to the observation deck above. She carried no camera, just instruments recorders, and an overwhelming sense that the ocean had turned its face toward her. Her descent was smooth at first, 30 meters, 40, 50. Then her telemetry started flickering, heart rate spiking, temperature climbing inside the suit, not outside. The team prepared to pull her up, but she signaled to stop. Then silence. No voice, no ping, no signal, just static. They pulled her up after 60 seconds. She was alive, calm even. But in her hand, she clutched something, a piece of metal. Not from her suit, not from the equipment, just a small triangular shard, charcoal black, warm to the touch. And carved into it, faint but precise, was a shape no one recognized. A pattern of 3 concentric arcs that never quite closed. Always, almost, never complete. When asked where she found it, she only said, "It gave it to me." She never dove again. Historians still debate whether the drop is a natural phenomenon or an artificial boundary. Some think it's an old testing site, Cold War leftovers, bleeding radiation in strange ways. Others suspect it's a bubble of still time, a pocket in the sea that forgets to move forward. But those who've touched it, those who've seen what comes back, don't argue anymore. They don't speak about it at all. And Dr. Chan, she moved to a cabin in the mountains. Never gave interviews. Never published again. But a colleague once said she kept that shard of metal on her desk. Occasionally, he said she'd stare at it for hours, not reading, not analyzing, just listening. He asked her once what she thought it was. She blinked slowly, then said, "A message, or maybe a mirror." Now, as you hover above the patch of sea, known only to satellite scans and whispered coordinates, you notice something. The water below doesn't move. Not in waves, not in current, just still. Like glass poured over midnight. And if you're very quiet, if you hold your breath long enough, you'll feel it too. Not the chill, not the pressure, the pause, like the world's holding still for just a moment, waiting to see what you do next. At first, Buoy 17 was just a blip, a routine satellite ping from a monitoring station in the South Pacific. It checked in every 6 hours, like a loyal pet transmitting ocean temperature, pressure changes, and current drift. The kind of data only scientists and sleepy grad students care about. Then one day, it stopped. Not uncommon. Equipment fails. Storms happen. Batteries die. Except the weather was clear. No seismic activity. And the signal didn't fade. It snapped. Gone. They wrote it off, scheduled a replacement, and moved on. Until 11 days later, when Buoy 17 pinged again. Only now, it wasn't where it disappeared. It was 4,000 miles west, in the middle of a stretch of open ocean, with no currents fast enough to explain the journey, and no one willing to admit it could have simply floated that far. That signal came with a data dump. Compressed audio pressure logs, internal diagnostics, most of it gibberish, half-corrupted bytes. But one thing stood out. A pulse. Every 47 seconds, a low metallic thrum. Like a deep breath drawn through a copper flute. You can almost feel it in your teeth when you listen. It's not random. It builds in volume and complexity, as if something is learning to inhale. They called it the breathing ocean. The team thought it might be a signal echo, a harmonic created by passing ships. But the shipping lanes were empty that week. The pattern didn't match any engine hum or anchor drag. It was too clean, too deliberate. The backup buoy, Buoy 18, was deployed a few weeks later to the same area, same protocol, same instruments. This time, the team added redundancies, triple encryption, isolated audio channels, dual power cores. They even reinforced the satellite ping rate to every 3 hours instead of 6. It lasted 2 days. On the second night, just after sunset, the signal became erratic. Not scrambled, pulsed, like someone was knocking on the digital door. Then the breathing began again. This time faster, every 42 seconds. The hum deeper, more textured, like it had grown lungs. The engineers isolated the signal, expecting machine error or maybe a coding loop. What they found was stranger. The breathing wasn't consistent. It wavered slightly between pings, just enough to suggest emotion, fatigue, maybe anticipation. And then it changed. The final transmission from Buoy 18 included something no one expected, a secondary audio file. Barely audible, almost lost in static. But when cleaned up, it revealed what sounded like speech, not language, not syllables, just the cadence of words, like someone was mimicking the shape of conversation. A debate still rages over that recording. Some claim it's pareidolia, our brains trying to find speech in noise. Others say it's interference. But a quiet few, they believe the ocean answered. That somewhere beneath the reach of sonar and satellite, something old is trying to talk back. The strange part, after Buoy 18 vanished, Buoy 17 stopped transmitting again, gone, without a trace. Weeks later, fishermen hundreds of miles away reported something bizarre, a circular patch of ocean water, smooth as glass, no waves, no wind, hovering at exactly the same coordinates where Buoy 18 had gone dark. And inside it, floating just below the surface, was a single red light, blinking once every 42 seconds, just like breathing. They didn't approach, didn't anchor, didn't even slow down. One fisherman, an older man who'd worked those waters for 40 years, said it best: "I've heard whales talk. I've heard storms whisper, but I've never heard the ocean breathe. Not like that. Historians still debate whether Buoy 17's journey can be explained by shifting currents or rogue gyres. And the breathing noise, possibly seismic resonance, maybe volcanic vent patterns. But the satellite logs don't lie. Something moved that buoy thousands of miles, and it brought its echo with it. And what about the voice? What if it wasn't trying to speak to us? What if it was trying to become us? To understand our rhythm, to mimic our patterns, to learn the shape of our sound. And now you're floating above that same stretch of ocean. The sky is calm, the waves gentle, but underneath something shifts. You don't hear it. You feel it. A deep thrum, like a giant drawing breath from a mile below. Then silence. Then again, slightly closer. A rhythm, a cycle. You exhale, and something else inhales. This isn't just water anymore. It's listening, and it remembers your breath. You're aboard a trawler in the North Atlantic. It's midnight. The deck lights hum softly above you, flickering like moth wings, and the sea, well, it's too calm, which means something's wrong. That's just how it works out here. They've hauled up nets before. Tuna, squid, weird translucent things that squirm and blink like they're made of jelly and regret. But this haul is different. Something shifts inside the net, not like fish, not like weight, like a rhythm, a quiet, deliberate movement. The crew falls silent. Then the crane swings over and the net splashes down onto the deck. And there it is. At first glance, you think it's a tangle of plastic, something synthetic, woven, slick, almost slimy. But then the light hits it, and you see the limbs, dozens of them, hair-thin filaments, each one twitching independently, like they're trying to spell something into the air. They wave, recoil, curl, then rest again. And in the center of this translucent mess, blinking slowly, like twin lanterns under fog, are its eyes. Large, pale, lantern yellow. Not glowing exactly, but catching the light in a way that feels wrong. Like they reflect something behind you, not in front. They don't blink, they pulse, once every 8 seconds. It doesn't writhe, doesn't struggle, just rests there the way a spider might pretend to be a leaf. Quiet, patient, waiting. A crewman reaches toward it. His hand hovers over one of the blinking eyes, then snaps back. He doesn't scream. He doesn't explain. He just walks away and refuses to return. The creature is cold. Not cold like ice, cold like absence. Cold like nothing. One sailor says it dropped the temperature on deck by 6 degrees in under a minute. Another swears the radio stopped working while it was aboard. But here's the weirdest part. It doesn't feel alive in the normal sense. There's no pulse, no tremor, no fight. But it watches, and not just with its eyes. It feels like the whole creature is a sense organ, that every filament is an ear, a tongue, a radar dish, that it's listening in stereo, tasting the language of metal breathing in the electromagnetic soup that is human presence. They kept it aboard for 30 minutes. That was a mistake. First, the lights dimmed. Then the engines shuddered. Then this part is harder to explain. One of the crew members started mimicking it. He stood near the rail arms, loose at his sides, head tilted back. And every 8 seconds, in sync with the blinking eyes, he opened his mouth and exhaled. Not forcefully, not dramatically, just enough to fog the air in front of him. And his eyes, they looked pale, reflective, like light was bouncing back through them. They found him later in the engine room, curled beneath a tarp, He didn't remember the deck, didn't remember the creature, said he just wanted to listen more closely. That's when they decided to let it go. They slid the thing back over the rail, letting it slip into the sea like a discarded dream. It didn't fight, didn't flee. It just sank, and the moment it disappeared beneath the waves, the lights came back on. The temperature returned. The crew started breathing normally again. Historians still debate what this creature was. The closest parallel anyone could find was a siphonophore, a colonial organism made of dozens of specialized parts. But even siphonophores don't blink, and they definitely don't synchronize with people. Some say it was alien. Others believe it was a deep-sea intelligence, one that communicates not through sound or movement, but light. 8 seconds on, 8 seconds off, like Morse code for something that never needed words. They called it lantern eyes, and none of them ever went back to those coordinates. The captain refused to log the haul officially. The footage was deleted, the logs edited. It was like it never happened. But one sailor kept something, a single silky filament wrapped around his finger when he pulled off his glove. He stored it in a plastic container in his bunk, not for research, just as a reminder. Years later, he showed it to a journalist, said it still moved, slowly, like it was reacting to breath, like it was waiting to be heard again. And now you're here, floating above the same patch of water. No sound, no breeze, just the sea beneath you, calm and flat like a lid over something ancient. You hold your breath for a moment. 8 seconds pass. Then the water below you ripples just once, a soft blink, and you can't help but wonder if something is watching. Something not gone, just listening. It begins with a storm, but not the kind that thrashes and howls. This one is slow, strange, more like a mood than a meteorological event. The sky goes a grayish violet. The air thickens. The horizon starts folding in on itself like an old photograph curling at the edges. You're on a freighter in the mid-Atlantic, and the crew is uneasy. Not because of waves, there are none, but because the barometers drop the radars blank, and the sea has gone still enough to reflect your own expression. Then the whispers start, not loud, not alarming, just soft, gentle, like someone talking through fabric 2 rooms over. You first hear them in the galley, then in the hallways, then through the vents. Always the same, a name, spoken slowly, repeated, then again and again. The crew assumes it's interference. Maybe the radio's caught a ham signal, or there's bleed-through from a nearby ship. But it's not coming from the radio. It's coming through the metal, through the walls, through the bolts, like the ship itself is humming. The storm intensifies, not in wind or wave, but in pressure, the kind that makes your ears pop and your thoughts stumble. The clouds glow faintly green, and the sea begins to shiver. That's when the names become recognizable. You hear one whispered behind you in the engine room. Another crewman hears his late grandmother's name while checking the cargo manifest. The cook hears a name she hasn't spoken in 30 years, a childhood friend who drowned in a flooded basement when they were 12. Everyone hears someone different, but the captain, he hears his own, repeated, over and over, spoken like a lullaby, like a memory not his own. And it's not just sound anymore. The walls vibrate in rhythm with the words. The lights flicker in sync. And down in the hold, something bangs 3 times, then stops, then again. The storm peaks around 3 to 17 a.m. The sky goes completely black. Not night black. Absence black. As if the clouds have absorbed the stars, the sea matches it one seamless curtain of unlight. Then for 47 seconds, the ship stops moving. Completely. The GPS freezes. The radar shuts off. The engine hums, but does not engage. It's like the world hit pause and forgot to hit play again. During those 47 seconds, every crew member experiences the same thing, the sound of water dripping footsteps behind them, and someone saying their name from the inside, from inside their own heads. One man faints. Another screams and jumps overboard, vanishes without a splash. The captain locks himself in the radio room and tries to call anyone, but all he hears is static that bends in pitch like breath. And then just like that, it ends. The storm clears. The sea warms. The sky returns to gray. But the ship's anchor chain is gone. The anchor was never dropped. And in the captain's quarters, scrawled into the condensation on the window, is one final word. Remember, no one claims to have written it. The glass is sealed. No external access. And yet, there it is, still wet. Historians still debate whether the whispering storm was a natural acoustic anomaly or the result of prolonged atmospheric inversion, a real weather event that can trap sounds near the surface and cause bizarre echoes. But the names, there's no scientific explanation for that. A few months later, one of the sailors receives a postcard in the mail. No return address. Just a photo of the open ocean and a handwritten message. Do you still hear them? He moves inland the same week. Another crew member stops speaking entirely, except to recite without variation the same 12 names in a loop every morning at dawn. And the captain, he disappears. The ship is later found adrift near the Azores. Intact. Engines running. No crew. No signs of struggle. And on the bridge, tucked beneath the captain's log, is a list of names. Hundreds of them. Most are unknown, but tucked near the bottom is yours. Now above that same stretch of sea, the air is still. The barometer holds. The clouds wait. You close your eyes, and in the soft groan of the hull, you think you hear something. Your name, spoken slowly, remembered. It shouldn't be here. You're floating above a series of underwater coordinates off the Azores, where the seafloor is supposed to be a gentle slope, plain sediment, a few ridges, nothing unusual. But that's not what's here. What's here is a monolith, jet black, smooth as obsidian, and tall, so tall, it looks like it grew from the seabed itself, piercing upward with ancient purpose. When it was first spotted by sonar, they thought it was a mapping error, a software glitch. The shape was too geometric, too vertical, too exact. Then they sent an ROV, and the glitch stared back. The growing monolith, as it's now reluctantly called, stands over 90 feet high, though that number changes. That's the first oddity. Each time it's measured, it's a few centimeters taller, always upward, never wider, never thicker, just stretching, like it's reaching for something. And here's the second strange thing. It grows after earthquakes, not local quakes, not regional. Any quake. A tremor in Japan, a shake in Peru, even distant rumbles beneath Iceland. Each time the monolith rises, it's not just growing, it's responding. Geologists can't explain the material. It looks like glass, but it's denser than granite and doesn't chip when struck. It doesn't register heat signatures, but it emits warmth enough that nearby water stays a full degree warmer than the surrounding ocean. One diver describes it like standing next to a sleeping animal, something with breath, but no pulse. Then there's the time distortion. Within 50 feet of the monolith, time passes differently. Instruments run slow. Digital watches lose seconds. Divers report their oxygen lasting longer, their descent feeling shorter, and their thoughts becoming sluggish, like trying to think through syrup. One researcher sat on the ROV feed and timed it manually. 55 minutes inside the zone, 78 minutes outside. That's a 23-minute gap. Time didn't stretch. It split. They sent in more divers. 2 returned with nosebleeds. One had a vivid dream during a 6-minute dive, an entire dream about walking through a hall of mirrors where each reflection aged faster than the one before. When he surfaced, he claimed he'd been down there days. Another diver claimed the monolith had spoken to him. Not in words, not even in thoughts. Just a knowing. A pull behind his sternum like gravity with a voice. Historians still debate what this object could be. Some insist it's an ancient volcanic extrusion, like basalt columns, that coincidentally grew perfectly vertical. Others whisper about pre-human artifacts, a machine buried in time. But no theory explains the third anomaly. A thermal scan of the base revealed fluctuations like breath. The heat rises and falls in intervals. 32 seconds up, 32 seconds down. Breathing, and it's getting louder. Not in sound, there is no sound. The loudness is felt through vibrations in the chest, through shifts in inner ear pressure, through the way your own thoughts feel slightly echoed. One ROV came back scratched, not from collision, from inside, from something etched in thin, almost invisible lines. Lines that form a spiral. That shape again. Always that shape. They tried touching it once. A mechanical arm extended, barely tapped the surface. The arm snapped in half with a soundless jolt. No resistance, no force. It was just gone, like that piece of the world had decided not to exist anymore. And then the ROV powered down, not dead, just still, like it had been politely asked to rest. When it finally rebooted, its cameras were filled with static. But in one frame, just one, a faint outline appeared in the blur. A silhouette, long, narrow, facing the ROV, then gone. The project was halted. The footage sealed. The site listed as geologically unstable on international charts. But divers still go. Some return, most don't. And of those who do, they come back changed, quiet, slower, as if they're still listening to something far below. And when asked why they dove in the first place, they often say the same thing. I needed to see if it was watching. Now you're floating above it. The water is warmer here. Not much. Just enough to notice. You look down. The monolith is still there, still growing, still breathing, still remembering. And if you watch long enough, you'll swear you see it rise just a little when you exhale. The sea is full of junk. Nets crates, sonar buoys, unfortunate shoes. Even compasses, cheap plastic ones that go cloudy after a few months. They break easily, drift off fishing boats, end up stuck in coral, or buried in the sand. But the ones found near the Sulu Sea don't drift. They don't break. And they don't point anywhere at all. They spin forever. That's why locals call it the Compass Graveyard. It's not a place marked on charts. But it's known by those who sail nearby fishermen, who refuse to anchor their cargo ships that detour an extra hour to avoid it. Ask them, and they'll just say, the sea forgets where north is. Then they'll get real quiet. The phenomenon was first documented in 1984 by a Philippine naval patrol whose navigation systems went haywire while investigating illegal trawling. Their ship drifted several kilometers off course overnight, despite calm seas and no engine failure. Every compass on board, from digital panels to cheap souvenir models, spun continuously like they were chasing a direction that kept moving. When the crew dropped anchor, the chain rattled, like it was being dragged sideways, pulled not by current, but by something underneath. A diver was sent down to check for snags. He came back 30 seconds later, breathing hard, eyes wide. He hadn't reached the seafloor. It was spinning, he said. Not me. The ocean. The official report labeled it instrumental anomaly due to magnetic interference. That was it. Case closed. But years later, when oceanographers returned with deep-sea drones, they found something stranger. The compasses were still down there, dozens of them, resting on the seafloor, untouched by corrosion, their needles still twitching in frantic little circles. Some were embedded in coral. Others floated gently just above the sand, suspended by strands of kelp. And each one was spinning counterclockwise, exactly counterclockwise, not off by a degree, not random, perfect. They gathered several and brought them aboard. The moment they passed a certain altitude, about 10 meters from the surface, they stopped, completely, dead still, like they'd been unplugged. And when lowered back down, they started again. This wasn't magnetic. Not in any way that science understood. No geological anomaly, no iron deposit, no tectonic plates in flux. It was something else. One researcher placed a digital gyro next to a spinning compass and saw something even more disturbing. The axis of rotation for the compass needle didn't match Earth's magnetic field at all. It was tilted by exactly 33.3 degrees. Historians still debate the relevance of that number. Some connect it to Masonic lore, ancient geometry, or latitude lines drawn long before we knew what satellites were. Others dismiss it as a coincidence, but no one's been able to replicate it in a lab. The oddest thing wasn't the spin. It was the engraving. On 3 of the recovered compasses, faint markings had appeared along the needle shafts, thin spiral grooves carved so precisely they couldn't be seen without magnification. Not scratched, not etched, grown, as if the metal remembered something it shouldn't. Engineers ran metallurgical tests. The results were impossible. Each compass needle, regardless of brand year or origin, had slightly altered atomic alignment, like the lattice of the iron had twisted in response to something not of this earth. They stopped collecting after that, and then the dream started. 3 crew members on the recovery ship began reporting the same sequence, drifting downward through water that got thicker as it darkened, not heavier. Thicker, like descending through honey made of stars. And always, they said something waited at the bottom. One described it as a hole in the sky that had fallen into the ocean. Another claimed it wasn't watching him. It was remembering him, like someone flipping through old photographs. None of them returned to sea. Eventually, the area was quietly cordoned off. Not banned, just discouraged. Charts showed navigational distortion zone. Pilots skipped it. Satellites blurred it. The name faded from reports, but not from memory. There's still a buoy there somewhere, quiet, passive, listening. Every few weeks it sends back a pulse, and once, just once, the pulse was answered. The signal was faint. A reverse ping. And when researchers converted the data to waveform, it wasn't just a pulse. It was a spiral, visual, not audible. The pattern folded over itself, repeating inwards always shrinking, never ending. Like something deep below was tracing its memory into the current. They say water forgets, but metal remembers. Now, as you drift above the compass graveyard, you feel a strange sensation in your chest. Not pain, not fear. Tilt, like your insides are leaning slightly to the left, even though you're perfectly still. A feeling that your compass, the one inside your head, is trying to point toward something it was never meant to find. You hold up your hand, watch it tremble, and if you listen carefully, you can almost hear it. The whisper of a needle spinning without end, still looking, still lost. There are reefs that glow, reefs that pulse, reefs that crackle like old vinyl records in shallow tropical bays. But none of them listen not like this. This one doesn't have a name on any map. It was discovered by accident like so many of the ocean's best secrets. A deep sea trawler drifted too far off course, trailing nets along a forgotten shelf southeast of Madagascar. The crew noticed their sonar readings spike with irregular patterns, bouncing back too fast, then too slow. Like the sound waves weren't just echoing, they were being modified. They lowered a submersible drone. What it found still defies explanation. The reef doesn't look like a reef. No branching coral fans, no bright colors, no swarming fish. It rises out of the seafloor like a tangled ear canal made of translucent tubes, spiraling, overlapping, shifting in places too smooth for natural growth. And it hums, not like the hum of machinery, but like the low tone of a singing bowl, deep and slow, felt more than heard. The closer the drone got, the louder the vibration, and the more unstable its instruments became. Cameras began to flicker. Pressure sensors ticked and unticked like a nervous clock. And most curious of all, its depth gauge kept resetting itself. Not higher, not deeper, just uncertain. Like the drone didn't know where it was anymore. When researchers reviewed the footage, they noticed something else. The reef moves. Not quickly, not constantly. But over the course of several hours, its upper coils rotated 3 degrees clockwise, like a giant seashell adjusting in its sleep. And when they fast-forwarded the footage to observe the time-lapse, something even stranger happened. The movement synchronized with a nearby seismic event. Hundreds of miles away, a minor, undersea quake shook the East African rift, and at the same moment, to the minute, the reef shifted, almost imperceptibly, but real. It was responding. And then came the diver. They sent him in for water samples and tissue analysis. Just a short descent. He was tethered, monitored, and trained. All precautions observed. He came back different. Not hurt, not panicked, just quiet. He wouldn't talk for nearly 24 hours. Then, while reviewing the reef footage with the crew, he finally spoke. It was listening. When pressed, he explained. Not that he heard anything, but that the reef was responding to his presence. That the vibrations changed when he moved even slightly. That he could feel it, watching not with eyes, but with pressure, with shifts in tone, with subtle tremors in the bones of his jaw. He described it like standing in a cathedral built by whales. Every sound, his breath, his heartbeat echoed. Not away, but back, as if the reef was recording him, studying him, storing him somewhere inside its layered tunnels. Historians still debate whether coral can exhibit something like sentience. We know some species react to touch, to light, even to magnetic fields. But this was different. When the crew took samples of the reef's outer layer, they discovered a repeating structure in the tissue, a fractal shape, one they'd seen before in the human inner ear. Tiny hair-like structures, cilia, the kind that help us hear. That's when the theory started. That the reef wasn't just alive, it was acoustic. That it had evolved or been designed to perceive the world not through sight or taste or smell, but vibration. An oceanic ear, a structure meant to listen. To what? That's the part no one agrees on. Some believe it's passively gathering data, like a black box for the planet. Others think it might be an interface, something waiting for the right frequency. A tone, a word, a signal. But one theory, quietly circulated, suggests something more unnerving. That it's not listening to us, that it's listening for something, and we just happen to be in the way. Since the discovery, at least 3 other reefs have been found with similar structures. Not identical, but clearly related. Each in different oceans. Each vibrating at a slightly different frequency. Each reacting to different stimuli, light current depth, but all sharing the same silent behavior. They move more at night, and they move toward the nearest sound. In one test, a drone emitted a steady tone, middle C, 261.6 Hz, for 6 hours. The reef twisted slightly, as if leaning closer. The drone malfunctioned 2 hours later. The footage, blurry and distorted, showed the tubes of the reef reaching upward like arms. Not violently, not quickly, just curiously. The diver who had first descended returned once more. He stayed only 5 minutes. When he surfaced, he looked dazed, water clinging to his suit, like it was reluctant to let go. He whispered something to the medic as they peeled off his mask. They sang back. No one knows what he meant. He hasn't gone underwater since. Now, as you hover above the listening reef, the sea around you feels quiet, not empty, just attentive. You exhale. The bubbles drift upward. The water around you stirs faintly, and from far below, so faint it could be imagined, a vibration rises, low, steady, matching your breath. The ocean is listening, and it remembers your voice. It looks like any other patch of open sea. Calm, quiet. The kind of blue that makes you think nothing bad ever happens here. But somewhere beneath this surface, a shape waits a shape that shouldn't exist. And every few years, it surfaces just long enough to take something. That's the legend anyway. Locals along the edge of the South China Sea whisper about it when the fog rolls in, heavy and low. They call it the sandbar that eats ships. It appears, they say, without warning. Sometimes on the horizon, sometimes beneath the keel, but always too late to avoid. The first official account came in 1937, when a British cargo ship radioed a distress signal claiming they'd run aground on a sandbar in open water. No chart, no warning, no land in sight. The radio cut out mid-sentence. Search teams found nothing. No debris, no oil slick, just a faint trail of churned water that led to nowhere, like a footprint in fog. Since then, there have been dozens of similar incidents. Fishing vessels vanishing mid-haul, tour boats blinking off radar, all within a radius of a few hundred square miles. And every time it starts the same way. The water gets too still. The wind dies. And then there's land. Only it isn't land, not really. Not an island. Not a reef. Just a long, narrow stretch of pale sand rising from the sea like a spine. Witnesses say it doesn't ripple, doesn't soak. It's dry, dusty, as if it's been waiting just beneath the waves, holding its breath. Some ships get close enough to anchor. A few even send landing parties ashore. Those are the ones that vanish entirely, and the ones that escape, they come back different. One such vessel, a Chinese fishing trawler, was found drifting engine idling, no crew aboard. The ship was intact, supplies untouched, food still warm in the galley, but the floor covered in sand. Not sea sand, not the damp grit you find near water. Desert sand, bone dry, fine as flour, and on every window, every single pane of glass was a small handprint. Perfectly formed, too small to be adult, too wide to be child, and too many, dozens, hundreds, as if a crowd had gathered outside pressing against the glass, watching. One diver who investigated the region later described the sandbar in his log. "It's not a sandbar," he wrote. "It's breathing. I felt it move beneath my feet, like lungs, like something just below the surface was rolling over to look at me." Historians still debate whether the sandbar is a natural phenomenon, perhaps a rogue shoal, pushed upward by seismic activity, then eroded again by tides. But none of the explanations stick. Why does it only appear briefly? Why is there never silt or coral or vegetation? Why does it feel like memory? Because here's the strangest part. Every ship that's reported seeing the sandbar and survived has one thing in common. They were all carrying photographs, old ones, developed on film, stored in boxes or frames or envelopes, sometimes decades old. And in every case, at least one photo goes missing. Not stolen, not misplaced, just gone. And the negative erased. No image, as if it was never taken. One sailor swears the missing picture showed up again on the sand, moments before they fled, lying flat and dry, half-buried, printed not on paper, but on glass. And on the back, etched in the glass with tiny scratches, was a single word: stay. The government doesn't officially recognize the anomaly, but satellite scans of the region show a repeating pattern, something just under the surface shifting shape every few months. It's not sand. It's not rock. It's movement. And sometimes, just sometimes, it breaks the surface. The last known encounter happened in 2021. A recreational yacht with 6 passengers radioed in a strange sighting what they thought was a mirage. A narrow strip of beach, pristine and unmarked, glittering in the afternoon sun. They approached curious. They stepped onto the sand. The transmission ends there. The yacht was found 3 days later, drifting aimlessly. Empty. No blood. No struggle. Just silence. And on the deck, wet footprints leading up from the railing. 6 sets, and one extra, smaller. Now, you hover above those waters still, and warm, the breeze gone silent. The sun sinks low, casting everything in gold. And below, you just for a moment, something stirs. The water wrinkles, not like wind, not like current, more like a muscle flexing. You blink, and in the space of that blink, the sea looks different. Flatter, lighter, sanded. You imagine stepping down, feeling that strange, warm grit beneath your feet. The sky too quiet, the waves too far away, and then a whisper behind you. Stay, but you don't. You drift upward, and beneath you, the ocean folds itself shut again, smoothing over the scar like nothing ever happened, but you know better now. Some things in the sea aren't places. They're invitations, and not all of them want to be declined. At first, it feels like déjà vu. You've seen this current before, its shape, its pull. But something is off. It doesn't move like the others. It doesn't flow down. It rises. It's called the rising current. And it does exactly what it shouldn't. It pulls everything upward. It was first noticed during a routine dive along the southern ridge of the mid-Atlantic when a submersible's vertical thrusters began firing in the opposite direction. At first, the crew thought it was an error, maybe a gyroscopic miscalculation or faulty buoyancy sensors. Then the cameras showed it fish debris and plumes of sand rising against gravity floating up from the seafloor into the cold, open blue like reverse snowfall. And it wasn't violent. Nothing was yanked upward. It all moved with eerie calm, as if the ocean itself had flipped for a moment and didn't bother telling anyone. The pilot reported a strange sensation of lightness, not just physically, but mentally, like his thoughts were unmoored. He described it as drifting inside my own memory. That was the last thing he said before the signal cut out. They pulled him back manually. He returned breathing conscious, but changed. Not hurt, not shaken, just slower. He said things like, "We've already been there," and it was a beginning, not a place. Then he forgot his name for 3 hours. The rising current has no clear shape, no consistent location. It appears unpredictably, sometimes for minutes, sometimes hours, then vanishes. Oceanographers who've tried to model it can't agree on a cause. It doesn't correspond with tides, temperature shifts, or geothermal vents. It's not a bubble plume or a methane release. It's something else. Because here's the thing, nothing that enters it comes back the same. Samples of water drawn from the zone show strange isotopic ratios, almost like the water has aged in reverse. Plankton pulled from it have unfamiliar cellular structures as if they were never part of Earth's known taxonomy. But what really disturbs scientists is the time discrepancy. On one dive, 2 identical watches were synchronized, one left aboard the research vessel, the other sent into the current with the submersible. After an hour, the watch that returned had lost 6 minutes. Not in mechanical error, not from battery failure. It simply read an earlier time. Historians still debate what this means. Could it be a bubble in space-time, a ripple caused by deep-sea tectonic strain? Or some propose, more nervously, a temporary thinning between dimensions? But one theory stands out, and it came from a child, a 12-year-old girl named Eleni, daughter of one of the researchers, watched the recovered footage of the rising current and said quietly, "It looks like the ocean is undoing." The team didn't take her seriously until they noticed something else. In every recorded instance of the current, nearby equipment would begin to fail in oddly specific ways. Not chaotic, selective. Audio logs would erase, but only from a specific 5-minute window. Cameras would glitch, but only when pointed at the center of the upward flow. Divers reported forgetting only certain words: depth, pressure, surface. As if the ocean was pruning memories, curating them, like a librarian removing pages. One man who entered the current for less than 10 minutes reported hearing a low tone that made his bones vibrate. Not unpleasant, just ancient. He claimed it reminded him of lullabies from a language he'd never learned. He asked to go back in. They wouldn't let him. He disappeared from the research station 2 nights later. His wetsuit and tank were found folded neatly on the edge of the dive platform. His dive computer still running, recording the last data point, a sudden temperature spike, but only inside the wetsuit. Since then, researchers have theorized that the rising current isn't just water, it's a message, one that moves upward like smoke from a forgotten fire. Some say it's memory leaving the ocean. Others think it's a rewind button, one pressed by something below, something with a different relationship to time. And then there are the ones who believe it's a path, not for us to follow, but for something else to come up. Now you float above a patch of sea, The charts call clear, but you feel it. A subtle lift in your gut. Your hair rises just slightly. Your heartbeat slows, and far beneath the light seems to stretch upward, not down. You drop a coin into the sea. It doesn't sink. It hovers, just for a second, then spirals upward. You think about time, about memory, about how even the deepest parts of the world might want to forget themselves once in a while, and how sometimes, just sometimes, the past rises to the surface to look you in the face. They called it a rock at first, a slab. Just another chunk of ancient seabed broken off from some tectonic shrug millions of years ago. The ocean floor is littered with them, cracked, eroded, fossilized by pressure and time. But this one wasn't just lying there. It had been placed, flat, centered, and perfectly carved. The carved slab was discovered near the edge of the Peru-Chile Trench by a geological survey team scanning for fault activity. What they found instead was a rectangular stone about 6 meters long, 3 meters wide, and smoother than it had any right to be. At first, they assumed erosion, maybe a sedimentary fluke, or some chemical smoothing effect caused by hydrothermal vents. But when they ran their submersible's camera over its surface, something unexpected caught the light. Lines, dozens of them, etched with precision, angled, geometric, and unmistakably artificial. Maps, not modern ones, not even ancient terrestrial ones. These were topographical, but of land masses that didn't match any known continent. One appeared to show a vast circular island surrounded by concentric ridges, not unlike Plato's description of Atlantis. Another depicted long coastlines with jagged river systems and labels in no language anyone could recognize. Just spirals, interlocking ones, always spirals. And in the very center of the slab, an empty circle, not blank, just absent. As though the stone had refused to record whatever was supposed to go there. The dive team captured hours of footage. They debated theories, ancient civilizations, pre-flood cultures, or something older, non-human. The excitement buzzed through every message they sent to the surface. They planned to return in 2 days with a recovery crew and excavation equipment. But when they came back, the slab was gone. Not destroyed, not broken, just missing. The seabed, where it had rested, was flat and undisturbed. No drag marks, no debris, not even a difference in silt density. Just as if it had never been there. The only clue, a single shard of black stone, sharp-edged and warm to the touch, buried half an inch beneath the sand. When examined under microscope, the shard displayed a repeating pattern, microscopic grooves forming what appeared to be a spiral grid, similar to the carving style of the slab. Only this time the grooves weren't engraved. They were grown, like the material had arranged itself, atom by atom, into a memory. One geologist tried to 3D model the full slab, using only the footage from the first dive. But each time he assembled the contours, the land masses shifted slightly, as if the carvings refused to hold still. Then the dream started. The modeling team began reporting strange sleep disturbances. They described walking across shorelines they didn't recognize, following rivers that whispered, "Not here, not yet." One woman woke up with sand in her bed. Another sketched a coastline in her sleep, nearly identical to one of the carvings on the slab. None of them had seen the dive footage. None of them had even been on the boat. Historians still debate what the slab was. A lost relic of some sunken civilization, an artifact from a time before humans, or a memory stored in stone meant to be found by someone else. Some believe it wasn't made for us at all, that it's a waypost, a timestamp for travelers not bound by time in the way we are. A record not of where we are, but of when. And if that's the case, the missing center might not be a blank. It might be a hole, a window, or worse, a slot, waiting for something to be inserted. Some have pointed to ancient stories, legends of tablets that glow in moonlight stones, that hum when placed near others' maps, that show places no longer visible on Earth. What if the ocean isn't hiding our history? What if it's storing it? And what if every time we find something like this, it's not a mistake, it's a test? One diver, reviewing the recovered footage a month later, paused on a close-up of the slab's center, zoomed in, enhanced, and there, barely visible in the grainy light, was an inscription, a single line, carved so faintly it didn't appear in any earlier scans. It read, "You are looking too soon. Now as you hover above that same stretch of seafloor, the water feels thick. Not physically, emotionally, like it's draped in secrecy. You imagine a vast stone lying below you, flat and patient, waiting for the right moment to return. You picture the missing center, the circle of absence, and you wonder what's supposed to fill it. A stone, a memory, a person. The ocean knows, and it's not telling. Not yet. The water looks normal, salty blue, reflective. But the temperature's wrong. Not hot, not cold. It fluctuates up, down, up again in a rhythm that doesn't match the sun, the current, or any known tide cycle. Every few minutes it warms slightly, then cools. Not enough to boil or freeze, just enough to notice. It's like the sea has a pulse. They first noticed it off the coast of Kamchatka, near a deep ocean thermocline, a natural boundary where warm surface water meets the colder, denser layers below. Thermoclines are common. They separate ecosystems. They bend sound. But this one moved, up and down, back and forth, sometimes even sideways. They called it the moving thermocline. Sonar scans showed a thick band of temperature differential wobbling like a jellyfish. But it wasn't responding to tides or time of day. It shifted regardless of external forces, as if it had its own agenda. Submersibles sent into the area reported mechanical interference. Cameras fogged over. Lights flickered. The water blurred like heat haze in the middle of a desert road. And the strangest part, nothing lived in it. No fish. No plankton. Not even microbes. A dead zone, just 30 feet thick, but stretching for miles. One diver described it as swimming through a sigh. The boundaries of the thermocline rippled, gently pressing against him in waves, then retreating. He said it felt like stepping between thoughts, like the ocean was thinking, and he had accidentally gotten in the way. And then he was pushed, not by current, not by motion, by pressure, a soft but undeniable nudge that sent him floating upward, away from the zone. As if something had decided politely that he didn't belong there. When he surfaced, his oxygen tank still half full, he said only one thing: it knows when you're in it. Thermal data later showed something else. The thermocline's shape didn't just wobble randomly. It pulsed in a pattern like a waveform, and not just any waveform, a musical one, with frequency ratios nearly identical to those used in ancient Greek lyres. That's when things got weirder. An acoustic specialist ran a simulation of the thermocline's motion and converted it to sound. It produced a low, mournful tone, like a cello submerged in water. Played on a loop, the sound caused unexpected reactions in the lab. One researcher fell asleep at her desk and began whispering in a language no one recognized. Another broke down, sobbing, claiming the tone reminded her of the moment before birth. And one man, who hadn't even heard the audio, only seen the waveform, refused to return to the building, saying the pattern made his teeth ache and his memories feel folded wrong. Historians still debate whether the moving thermocline is a natural phenomenon or something else. Some say it's a sentient current. Others think it's a boundary marker, an organic barrier between parts of the ocean that should not mix. But there's another theory, one less comfortable, that it's not a boundary at all, that it's a being, not alive in the way we understand, but aware. An intelligence formed not from brain or bone, but from temperature, from pressure gradients, from motion and stillness. A creature made entirely of transition. And like all creatures, it's curious. In one experiment, researchers introduced a heat source, a low-frequency laser designed to mimic geothermal flow. The thermocline responded, not quickly, not violently, just deliberately. It expanded, then contracted, then split. For 27 seconds, the band of warm water separated down the middle, creating a long, narrow corridor of silence. Not emptiness, silence. And through that corridor, the submersible camera captured something impossible. Light, not refracted, not artificial. Just a glow pulsing softly, moving upward. And then as quickly as it had come, the thermocline sealed shut again, the light gone. The silence returned. The footage was inconclusive, corrupted by static. But the timestamp was intact. The pulse matched the waveform from earlier. And when they played the sound back again, the tone had changed. Now it echoed, once, then twice, then silence, as if the ocean had answered. Since then, the thermocline has shifted locations. It now hovers near the edge of the Mariana Trench, deeper than before, harder to reach. Some believe it's hiding. Others say it's moving to meet something. And still others think it's not moving at all. It's growing, becoming, changing into whatever comes next. Now, as you float above it, the water around you hums, not loudly, just enough to vibrate the skin on your forearms. You feel your body warm slightly, then cool, then warm again. The sea beneath you pulses. You don't know why, but you exhale slowly. And in the moment, between breath and thought, something shifts. Not outside, inside. A memory that isn't yours. A sound you never heard, but somehow remember. The ocean is thinking again, and this time, it knows your name. It starts with a line, not a crack, not a canyon. Just a line, thin, rusty, and impossibly straight, running across the ocean floor for over 200 meters. A diver stumbled upon it while mapping coral growths off the coast of Madagascar. He was expecting reefs, rock formations, maybe a shark if he was lucky. Instead, he found a chain, a single iron chain, thick as a man's wrist, coated in silt and barnacles, corroded with age, but unmistakably manufactured, forged. Each link perfectly symmetrical, locked into the next, extending across the sand, like some forgotten tether left by a god. They followed it. For hours, the ROV trailed along the length of it, over hills of sand, across ridges, through schools of silent fish that parted without protest. The chain never broke, never twisted, never kinked. Just link after link, stretching in a dead straight line, until it stopped. But it didn't end. It just disappeared, right at the edge of a deep trench. The last visible link dipped over the lip and down into darkness so complete it absorbed the submersible's lights. They called it the chain that ends in darkness. It's been there for who knows how long. Centuries, perhaps more. There are no records of anything being anchored there. No structures, no wreckage. Just the chain. And then, the coral. When biologists examined the area, they noticed something unusual. Coral normally grows in erratic clusters, colorful, chaotic, messy. But here, the coral formed in perfect triads. 3 sprigs, 3 branches, 3 tiny towers, again and again, always in threes, not just along the chain, but on it, as if the coral were responding to something, some vibration, some memory left in the metal. The chain wasn't just a relic, it was transmitting. When they ran frequency scans, a low hum emerged, too low for human ears, subsonic but constant, like a motor idling beneath the surface of time. It didn't vary, it didn't fade, just a steady pulse at intervals of 33 seconds. That number again. They sent divers deeper. One man descended alone, trailing a fiber optic tether behind him. As he approached the trench, the chain seemed to grow heavier in the water, not visibly, not physically, but psychologically. Like swimming toward a secret that didn't want to be uncovered. He reached the lip of the trench and shone his light down. The chain continued, endless. Each link rusted and barnacled but intact, untouched by whatever pressure should have snapped it centuries ago. He reported a shape moving below him, not fast, not large, just wrong, like a shadow with no source. And then his voice changed. The team on the surface heard it, not panic, not confusion, but reverence. He whispered, "It's still anchored." And then the line went slack. They reeled him in. He came back breathing, functioning, but blank. He couldn't remember the dive, didn't recognize the footage. He kept repeating one phrase: who drops a chain without knowing what it's tied to? The question stuck. Historians have speculated that ancient mariners might have dropped massive chains into the sea as ritual offerings, anchors for gods metaphors made real. Others think it could be a fragment of some forgotten construction effort, an early deep-sea rig long abandoned. But none of that explains the precision, or the hum, or the fact that when they scanned below the trench with high-frequency sonar, something pinged back. A structure, something massive, buried deep in the darkness beyond the reach of light or camera. Something the chain leads to. The data was classified shortly after. Public research stopped, but local sailors still whisper about it. They say sometimes in perfect silence you can hear it. Not the hum, the chain, groaning in the deep, like it's being pulled tight, or worse, uncoiled. Because chains aren't just used to hold things down. They're also used to pull things up. And now you hover above that forgotten line. The water around you vibrating softly every 33 seconds. You close your eyes, and in the blackness behind your eyelids, you see it. The links, the weight, the waiting, a tether, too ancient to explain, too straight to deny. And you wonder if you followed it long enough, deep enough, what would be at the end? An anchor, a gate, a door. You feel the vibration pass through your chest like a sigh. Not yours. The ocean's, whatever it's holding down, it hasn't let go. Yet, it started with a hole, perfectly round, 6 feet across, found in the sediment just off the coast of Greenland, at a depth where sunlight is a rumor and pressure is a commandment. The ROV operators weren't looking for anything strange, just surveying ancient glacier scars on the seafloor. But then the drone's lights passed over it, and the whole control room went silent. The Greenland hole didn't look natural. Its edges were smooth-rimmed with what looked like scorched rock, almost glassy. The interior was pitch black, deeper than the sonar could register. No echo, no bounce back, just silence like the signal had fallen into the earth and never hit bottom. The drone hovered, extended an arm, and lowered a small camera into the hole. It didn't come back. No tug, no snap, just gone. The tether remained hanging limp, unbroken. But the signal cut. Dead. They pulled it up. Half of the tether was cold. The other half, the part that had dipped below the rim, was warm. Too warm. At that depth, the water should have flash frozen anything that retained heat. But the cable came back as if it had spent hours in a sauna. Later, analysis showed mild molecular distortion, like the tether had been exposed to microwave radiation or something older. They returned the next week with a new probe equipped with layered shielding and thermal sensors. The moment it crossed the edge of the hole, it began recording pressure spikes, not downward, but inward. Like the hole was a throat swallowing not through gravity, but intention. One researcher noted something strange on the telemetry feed. At exactly 23 seconds into the descent, the camera captured a flicker of something on the edge of the lens. A hand, not reaching, not moving, just resting, pale, unmoving, human-shaped, and then it was gone. Everyone in the room saw it. No one spoke. They reviewed the footage 100 times, frame by frame. But when they exported it, the hand was gone. Not blurred, not distorted, just missing. Only the raw feed still showed it. The operator who first noticed it later described the hand as not threatening, not even alive, just present, like a photograph, like something from memory. Historians still debate whether the Greenland hole is a volcanic vent, a collapse in the crust, or something man-made, or rather, not man-made. But none of the explanations satisfy the data. For one thing, the hole moves. Not far, just enough to confuse returning teams. One week, it's at 68,399 degrees. The next, it's shifted 0.01 degrees southwest, like the ocean floor is slowly adjusting its position around it, accommodating it. And then there's the sound. During one of the dives, the ROV's audio sensors, normally useless at those depths, picked up a low-frequency thrum. At first, it was assumed to be a geological event, but when mapped onto a spectrogram, it revealed something more chilling, a heartbeat. Faint, slow, steady, 15 beats per minute. Not machine, not seismic, organic. They filtered the noise, isolated it, looped it, and discovered that every 16th beat came with a whisper, not in words, in tone, like a sigh shaped into rhythm. The whisper only triggered when the probe was within 12 feet of the hole's lip. One researcher described the sensation as being watched from below, but gently. They dropped a sonar beacon into the hole. It never pinged back. But 3 days later, the exact same beacon surfaced, off the coast of Norway. No explanation. No current could have moved it that far. No damage, nowhere. Just relocated. Like it had passed through a shortcut the Earth didn't want to talk about. And etched into the casing, something that hadn't been there before, was a spiral. You know the one by now. A thin, coiling groove that narrowed perfectly at the end. Engraved so precisely into the metal that it couldn't have been a scratch. It was intentional. The beacon still transmits. Same ID, same code, but now, every night at 3:19 a.m., it sends a second signal. A pulse, not data, just presence. Some believe the Greenland hole is a portal, an ancient one, not necessarily to another place, but to a when. Others think it's a geological wound, a spot where something entered a long time ago and forgot to close the door behind it. And there are a few, just a few, who think the hole isn't a feature. It's a mouth, sleeping, waiting, occasionally dreaming. Now, As you drift above those icy waters, the temperature around you is strangely comfortable. You shouldn't feel warm here, but you do. You exhale, and for a second, just a second, the surface beneath you pulses gently. Like breath, you hear nothing, but you feel it. The heartbeat, slow, welcoming. And somewhere below, something very old stirs. It's not reaching, not calling, just listening, as if it knows that one day you might answer. Somewhere between Hawaii and the Mariana Trench, in a stretch of ocean too deep for divers and too empty for trade routes, there's a sound. They've tried to name it, categorize it, explain it. But the file remains stubbornly labeled as one of the NOAA's unidentified deep ocean sounds. It was first recorded in the early 2000s by hydrophones scattered along the ocean floor. They called it the bloom, not because of what it was, but because of what it did. It didn't crash like a whale song or echo like a tremor. It unfurled, like petals opening underwater. Soft, expansive, impossible. The audio lasts only 13 seconds. A single note that rises gently, then falls. But those who've listened closely say it feels longer, like time stretches during playback. One researcher claimed he heard it for nearly a full minute. Another said it felt like being underwater in a cathedral alone, but watched. What's unsettling isn't the sound itself, it's what follows. Each time the bloom is detected, it's followed by anomalies. Water temperature rises not across the board, but in specific, narrow bands, hundreds of meters thick. Fish disappear from the region for days. Migrating pods of whales alter their paths to curve away from the area. One vessel, an unmanned acoustic drone, was dispatched to track the source. It lost signal 6 hours in. When it finally reconnected, its internal clock had reset to zero. Not to factory settings. To zero. Like time itself had restarted. All of its data logs were wiped, except one. A single image, blurred and distorted, taken from 20 meters below the drone. A shape, massive, indistinct, rising slowly from the dark. Like a mountain flexing. The team tried to clean the image. When they enhanced it, they saw curves. Not edges, not walls. Curves. Symmetrical, organic, as if the sound had come from a mouth too big to belong to anything known. Or a chest exhaling after a sleep so long the sea forgot it was there. Historians still debate whether the bloom is seismic, atmospheric, or biological. A few believe it's a kind of marine earthquake, a shifting of deep-sea basalt chambers. But even that doesn't explain the coordinated silences that follow. Because after each bloom, the ocean goes quiet, not just locally. Across wide swaths of the Pacific, hydrophones detect a drop in sound. No clicking shrimp, no whale calls, no grinding tectonics. Just nothing. As if the ocean holds its breath. Some call it an auditory reset. Others say it's a message, a clearing of the throat. And then there's the crew of the Esperada, a science vessel that happened to be near the coordinates of the last recorded bloom. Their instruments spiked without warning. Pressure gauges danced. A low hum filled the hull. And the onboard physician logged that several crew members experienced symptoms of intense déjà vu. One engineer wept uncontrollably. Another swore she saw her childhood bedroom reflected in the water. A third simply said, "It was like something knew me." Then as suddenly as it started, it stopped. When they reviewed the ship's logs, they found something impossible. The entire vessel had drifted 13 nautical miles, straight up. That's not a typo. Depth records confirmed it. The ship had been beneath the surface, fully submerged, but no one had noticed. There were no wet decks, no signs of flooding, no water damage. just the instruments and the memories. And in the radar, logs a note, not typed, not entered manually, just present. Beneath stillness, the breath. No one on the crew claimed to write it, but the file had a timestamp, exactly 13 seconds after the bloom. That was the last time the sound was heard. Until last year, it returned. Not once, but 3 times. Each identical in structure, each separated by 47 hours, each followed by the same anomalies. Water rising in vertical plumes, fish scattering like static, a soft humming in the deep. And one new detail, the sound was getting closer to the surface, initially recorded at 8,000 meters, then 5,400, then 2,100. It was ascending, but not quickly. Slowly, gradually, like something waking up in stages, or surfacing from a dream. Now you float above that same patch of ocean. No ships nearby, no birds overhead. Just the sea flat as glass, holding its secrets tightly. And then quietly it happens. You feel it before you hear it. A pressure in your chest, a warmth on the back of your neck, a trembling in your jaw that isn't fear, but anticipation. And then the sound, low, blooming, soft as a sigh in a cathedral. It rises, filling the space between seconds, unfolding inside your bones. You close your eyes, and for 13 seconds, the ocean forgets everything, including you. When it ends, you feel emptier, not worse, just quieter, like something has been taken from you and replaced with a memory you'll never quite understand. The sea stirs below, nothing rises, but the silence afterward hums with meaning. The bloom has spoken, and the ocean is listening. No one's sure who first saw the lights. It might have been a Japanese cargo ship in 1973, or a Chilean fishing vessel sometime in the early 80s. Or maybe they'd always been there, just overlooked, passed off as surface reflections, or oddities of cloud and moon. But once people started seeing them, they couldn't stop. They call them the marching lights. They appear in formation, long lines of pale orbs softly glowing, drifting just beneath the ocean's surface. Always at night, always in silence, moving in perfect unison, like lanterns pulled along invisible rails. And they're huge. Each orb is the size of a car. Not bright, not dazzling, just softly luminous. Their glow flickers gently, like candlelight through fogged glass. But the real mystery isn't their appearance. It's their pattern. They march, not randomly, not lazily, with discipline. Hundreds of lights, sometimes thousands, moving in synchronized rows, disappearing over the horizon as if following a path only they can see. And they don't bob like buoys or drift like jellyfish. They glide, silently, effortlessly, like memories following a trail back home. One research vessel, the Argo Tern, followed them for 6 hours across the Indian Ocean. Every attempt to approach was met with sudden power loss. Not full shutdown, just a sapping like the ship was too tired to chase. They recorded what they could. Thermal imaging showed the lights had no heat signature. Radar returned no data. Sonar pings passed through them as if they weren't there. Yet the crew saw them, clear as anything. One scientist sketched them obsessively in her notebook, each orb detailed with strange ridges along its edges like veins or branches. She claimed they pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. After the 6th hour, she collapsed, not from exhaustion, from silence. She said the lights had gone quiet. They had been talking to her, she said, not in words, not even in thoughts, in presence. And then suddenly they weren't, like someone hanging up the phone mid-conversation. Later, while reviewing footage, The team noticed something even more bizarre. When the video was slowed, a faint secondary flicker appeared within each orb, an internal pulse that rippled across the whole formation every 91 seconds. Like a wave, like breath. They matched the timing to deep ocean tremors and discovered a chilling correlation. Each ripple coincided with a tectonic adjustment deep beneath the seabed, almost as if the lights were listening to the earth or warning it. Historians still debate what they are. Some say they're bioluminescent creatures, jellyfish or siphonophores, behaving in ways we haven't yet documented. Others think they're a trick of the light phosphorescent algae disturbed by tides reflecting in strange ways. But every sailor who's seen them agrees on one thing. They know you're there. More than one ship has reported the lights breaking formation to circle their vessel. Never fast, never close, just one slow orbit, then back in line, like an inspection or a greeting. One sailor described it like being watched by ghosts who still remembered what it felt like to walk. And then there was the incident with the Marisol Dawn, a private yacht crew of 4. They encountered the lights 2 hours after sunset. They approached, they filmed, they vanished. No wreckage was found, no distress call, nothing. 3 weeks later, the boat washed ashore on a remote beach in the Philippines. Intact, drifting, no signs of damage, but inside the walls had been drawn on hundreds of spirals, carved with a knife, etched into wood, plastic, even glass, each one identical, each one centered on the same word, follow. One of the crew members was later found in a coastal village, dazed but unharmed. She didn't remember where she'd been, only that she'd walked across the water for days. She claimed the lights had opened a path. When pressed, she simply whispered, "They're not moving, we are." Since then, the lights have become legend. Mariners look for them during night shifts. Some claim to dream of them weeks in advance. Others swear by rituals, quiet songs, head boos, a whispered name of a loved one lost at sea. Sometimes, if you do that, they say the lights will respond, pulse once, as if in recognition, as if they're carrying memories, or souls, or messages from beneath. Now, as you float above open sea, the surface smooth as glass, and the stars hidden behind a gauze of cloud, you spot it, a single glow, then another, then hundreds, marching slowly across the water like a procession of forgotten lanterns. You don't move, you barely breathe, and as they pass beneath you, silent, solemn, you feel something in your chest loosen. Not fear, not wonder, permission. You think about following, about drifting just a little lower, about reaching out your hand toward the nearest orb. And you wonder, would it let you in? Would it carry you? And would anyone on the surface remember that you ever existed? The lights continue. One pulses faintly. You feel it in your ribs. And then, like a dream, folding itself shut, they vanish. Gone. But the water still glows just slightly. And you're left with the feeling that something immense and gentle has just passed by, without touching, without needing to, because it already knew you. It was a tourist who noticed it first, a drone hobbyist filming waves near the Faroe Islands. Just a sunrise shot missed over the water seabirds, the hum of rotors. But when he reviewed the footage, he paused on a single frame, a structure, faint shadowy, visible only for a second in the reflection of the water as the drone banked left. A shape just beneath the surface, geometric, deliberate, like a doorway. The frame went viral. Researchers dismissed it as digital compression, a trick of light, maybe a boat wake. But a few oceanographers recognized something troubling in the angles. Straight lines, too straight. Nothing underwater stays that perfect unless it wants to. An expedition was quietly organized. No fanfare, no press, just a small vessel with imaging equipment and one submersible. They called it the Submerged Arch. It wasn't easy to find again. The reflection had been fleeting, tied to a specific angle of the sun. But eventually, sonar picked up something solid. Flat base, two vertical sides, and a top beam connecting them. A literal archway standing upright on the seabed, like a door carved from the ocean's own stone. It measured nearly 30 feet tall, covered in sediment and encrusted with marine life, but still unmistakable. A doorway. To what? The dive team sent a probe through. It returned, but not immediately. There was a 4-second delay between entering the arch and emerging on the other side. The ROV had moved in a straight line. No interruptions. But the timestamp didn't match, and the footage, it glitched. For exactly 4 seconds, the video turned black. Not static, not distortion. Black. When they brightened the frame, nothing was visible except for a small white dot centered perfectly, as if the camera had looked into an eye. Subsequent dives revealed stranger details. The water near the arch was warmer by a consistent margin, 1.3 degrees Celsius. Instruments inside the sub experienced time-lag digital clocks falling behind by seconds, then correcting themselves without input. One diver described a sensation of floating in place while moving forward. He didn't mean physically. He meant emotionally, like his thoughts were happening ahead of him. But what truly unnerved the team was the sound. Microphones placed near the arch recorded a subtle tone, constant, barely audible, like wind humming through a keyhole. They ran it through spectral analysis and discovered harmonic patterns hidden within overlapping frequencies that mirrored human brainwaves during REM sleep. In other words, the arch was dreaming, or encouraging dreams. One researcher began sleepwalking on the 3rd day. He walked to the bow of the ship at precisely 3:14 a.m. each night and whispered the same phrase to the sea, "I am ready." He had no memory of this. After the 5th night, they removed him from the project. Another researcher began writing symbols in her notebook patterns no one recognized. When compared with sonar scans of the arch, the shapes matched decorative ridges found on the inner side of the structure. She'd never seen those scans. She had drawn them in her sleep. Historians still debate the nature of the submerged arch. Some suggest it's a lava formation, hollowed by time and tide. Others believe it's a remnant of a lost civilization, a temple ruin perhaps, or a monument that once stood above the waves. But the consistent energy readings, the glitches in time, the shifting sensation of self suggest something else, that it isn't just there. It's active, not a door in the traditional sense, a boundary. And boundaries don't just separate spaces, they separate states, waking from dreaming, now from then, human from other. In one final test, a diver swam through the arch alone. A tether kept him connected. A camera tracked his descent. The moment he passed beneath the archway, the feed cut out for 4 seconds. When it resumed, the diver was on the other side, calm, upright, breathing steadily. But his voice, different, deeper, slower. He spoke a single phrase before surfacing. It remembers the first light. He never explained it. Later, he reported vivid dreams of a city made of glass and bone beneath a starless sky. A place where buildings hummed and the sea above was red with memory. Now you float above the coordinates, the arch far below, hidden by current and cloud. The water is warmer here. You feel it in your chest like a heartbeat that isn't yours. And for a moment, the sea flattens unnaturally calm. You look down. The sun strikes just right. And there, flickering beneath the waves, you see it again. A doorway, waiting, not inviting, just present. You feel something stir in the back of your thoughts, not a memory, a promise. You could dive down, drift through, find out what those 4 seconds hold, but you don't. Not yet. The arch will wait. It always has. The signal came from nowhere. No origin, no decay. Just a clean, continuous tone that started on April 14th, 1998, at exactly 02:31 UTC, and didn't stop. It was first picked up by an array of deep ocean hydrophones off the western coast of Africa used to monitor for nuclear tests and underwater explosions. The system logged it automatically, assuming it was interference. But the tone continued, unchanging, pure. It became known as the endless note. The tone hovered at precisely 52.83 Hertzen, low soft, just on the edge of human hearing. It wasn't musical. It wasn't fluctuating. Just there. Constant, unwavering. They triangulated the origin point, or tried to. Every time they attempted to narrow its location, it shifted slightly. Not far. A kilometer here, a half-mile there. Like it was dodging detection. After 72 hours, the signal should have faded. It didn't. Instead, it began to affect other frequencies. Researchers noticed that other deep-sea sounds, whale songs, current rumbles, tectonic groans started drifting toward 52.83 Hz, not in pitch, but in resonance, as if they were trying to harmonize with it. And that's when the dreams began. Several technicians monitoring the tone began reporting auditory hallucinations, not voices, not music, just presence, a low pressure in the ears, a feeling of being called, though no words were used. One of them, an acoustic analyst named Claire, described it like this: "It's not a sound you hear. It's a sound that remembers you." She began sketching spirals in the margins of her reports. When asked why, she replied, "They're the only shape that fits." The signal continued. Weeks passed. Months. No satellite could detect its source. It wasn't seismic. It wasn't geological. And it wasn't human. Some began calling it the voice of the deep. Others just referred to it as the hum. But there was a growing theory that the tone wasn't just passive. It was an invitation. When autonomous subs were sent into the origin area, they behaved erratically. Not failure, just hesitation, as if they resisted movement. Steering commands lagged. Depth controls twitched. One drone spun in place for 13 minutes before powering down entirely. They recovered its onboard footage. For most of the recording, it was standard deep-sea fare, darkness particles, occasional flashes of bioluminescent life. But then at timestamp 00:41:17, a shape appeared in the distance. It wasn't large, just out of place, like a door, standing vertically in the water, thin, metallic, no hinge, no handle, just there. The drone approached, and at 3.2 meters from the shape, the signal abruptly ceased. The tone was gone. Across all listening stations everywhere in the world, the 52.83 Hertz hum stopped in the same instant, and for 0.9 seconds, nothing in the ocean made a sound. Then everything came back: whales, currents, crust shifts, but the endless note never again. The shape was gone from the footage. No record remained except for one frame, one blurry shot showing a faint spiral etched into the door's surface. Historians still argue over what the note was: a deep-sea anomaly, a trapped wave caught in some geothermal duct. Some believe it was artificial, a machine long buried finally activating. Others think it was a mind, not metaphorically, literally. A consciousness non-corporeal spread across frequencies instead of neurons. They point to how the sound affected cognition, how certain people heard echoes where none existed, how others began sleepwalking toward water. And then there's the theory no one wants to say aloud, that the tone wasn't for us, that it was a beacon, a call, a lighthouse beneath the waves, and someone answered it. A year after the signal vanished, a yacht drifted into port in Cape Verde, unmanned, no distress signal, fully intact. The crew was never found, but the ship's log, written in perfect detail, described calm seas, easy sailing, and a strange hum they heard just beneath the engine noise. The final entry, dated April 14th, 1999. Exactly 1 year to the day after the signal began read. We're going to find where the song ends. No other words followed. Now, you hover above that same stretch of ocean. There's no tone anymore, no sound, just an unsettling stillness. Like a party that ended 5 minutes ago and the music's been turned off. You almost miss it, that faint vibration in your bones. You hum softly to yourself, a random note, and for one impossible second, the sea beneath you answers back. Fenfrensto alsatishi triherten. You freeze. It's gone. You smile, because maybe it never really left. Maybe the endless note wasn't something to detect. Maybe it's something to join. And maybe it's still playing. Just not for everyone. Only for those who remember what silence sounds like just before the ocean begins to sing. The camera feed was silent. Not broken, not distorted. Just still. The ROV hovered motionless near the seafloor lights, casting long pale beams through the dark. And in that light, something shifted slowly, carefully, like a curtain of sand folding back on itself. The vanishing floor isn't marked on any map. No one even knew it existed until the exploration vessel, Calyptra, sent down a deep-sea drone to investigate a minor sonar anomaly off the coast of Argentina. Nothing dramatic, just a small, oddly shallow patch in an otherwise deep stretch of ocean. Except, it wasn't shallow. It only looked that way. When the drone descended, it reached what appeared to be the seafloor at 1,700 meters. Sediment, silt, a few barnacle-covered rocks, and then it kept going, right through the floor, not crashing, not breaking, just passing. The readings were clear the ground was a visual illusion. An optical layer that refracted light, mimicked texture, and even bounced sonar just enough to fool depth sensors. But it wasn't real. Beneath the false floor lay another 800 meters of nothing. Open water, black and still. The fake seafloor didn't just sit there. It moved. Not fast, not obviously. But when they compared still frames 5 minutes apart, the ridges and swirls had subtly rearranged. The rocks had shifted. The sediment had coiled, like the ocean was rewriting its own landscape. One operator said it reminded him of skin, not because of texture, but because of the memory. Every part of the false floor seemed aware of what it had just done, like a muscle that remembers how it bent. They lowered a weighted probe straight through. It disappeared. When they pulled the cable up, the probe was missing. The tether wasn't cut, just terminated, as if whatever lay below had politely declined to return it. The crew tried again this time, with a small camera attached. The same thing happened. Descent, penetration, nothingness, then gone. But not before a single image transmitted back. Not blurry, not murky. Crystal clear. An eye. Massive, reflective, unblinking, looking up. And then darkness. They reviewed the footage over and over. The eye didn't blink, didn't move. But it wasn't lifeless. It was curious. And in its iris, barely visible, were 3 faint spirals etched like grooves in obsidian. That was the last dive. The captain refused to return to the coordinates. The footage was archived, but rumors persisted that the vanishing floor wasn't hiding something beneath. It was the something, a membrane, a surface, a kind of artificial skin, covering a void too large to measure. Some researchers speculated it was geological, a thin shelf of iron-rich sediment formed by extreme pressure and tectonic events. But even that didn't explain the illusion. No matter what equipment they used, sonar, lidar, thermal, imaging, they all saw the same thing, a flat, stable ocean floor. Until they didn't. One vessel returned a year later unofficially. They dropped a sealed buoy with nothing but a depth gauge and a pressure logger. It floated just above the false floor for 19 hours. And then at 3:13 a.m., the pressure spiked. Not increased, spiked. For 3 full seconds, it registered over 9,000 PE, while allowing they spray, double the expected pressure for that depth. Then it stopped, as if something had opened and then closed. The buoy surfaced, intact. Inside the casing, they found water. Not surprising. But when tested, it wasn't normal seawater. It contained trace minerals not found anywhere else on Earth's oceans. And worse, microscopic fragments of metal, smooth and spherical, each one hollow, like tiny bells. When vibrated, they made no sound. But if held against the skin, they caused mild hallucinations. One researcher described hearing music underwater. Another said she could taste her own memories. Historians still debate what the vanishing floor could be. Some say it's a geological deception, an ancient trick of optics and pressure. Others whisper of something deeper. A covering, a seal, a kind of camouflage, grown or placed there to prevent something from being seen or leaving. There are old sailor legends, stories of flat seabeds that open like mouths, swallowing entire ships without splash or scream, of captains who swore they saw the seafloor breathe, and of divers who sank too far and returned mute, carving spirals into their own arms. Now, as you float above that silent patch of ocean, everything feels a little too calm. The sea is still, your body light, and the water warmer than it should be. You look down, and for a moment, the surface below you shimmers, not with light, with intent. Like it knows you're watching, and just for a heartbeat, you see it. The eye, open again, watching from beneath the skin of the world. You don't blink, but it does, slowly, then gone. The floor returns, but now you know it's not a floor at all. It's a mask, and whatever it's hiding, it hasn't left. It's waiting. It starts with static. Not from the radio, but from the water itself, tiny clicks and pops that seem to echo off nothing, like someone tapping glass in a vacuum. You wouldn't notice it unless you were listening for silence. They first picked it up in the Philippine Sea, an area known for complex currents and naval activity. At first, they thought it was equipment interference. The sound came at irregular intervals, not mechanical, not natural, just wrong. The clicks formed patterns, not Morse code, not sonar, just a rhythm. It became known as the tapping deep. The phenomenon appeared below 4,000 meters, far beyond where most marine life emits sound. The clicks weren't random. They repeated, always in sets of 7. Then silence, then a pause, then 7 again. And then came the echo. After each sequence, exactly 9 seconds later, the taps repeated quieter, more distorted, as if something had heard the pattern and was sending it back. One diver described it as playing catch with shadows. They sent a probe into the source zone. It didn't return. The tether snapped not from tension, but from corrosion. Metal turned brittle in seconds. The end was etched with tiny pockmarks. Chemical analysis showed exposure to acids not found in seawater or anywhere else on Earth. They called in acoustic engineers. One converted the tapping pattern into visual waveforms and noticed something strange. The pulses weren't just signals, they were shapes. Each rhythm, when plotted, resembled an anatomical form, a rib cage, a spine, a heart, not abstract, not symbolic, accurate, microscopically detailed, like sonar blueprints of creatures no one had ever seen. Creatures that shouldn't exist. One pattern matched a fetal skeleton, but 3 times larger than any known mammal at that stage of development. Another resembled a nervous system unattached to any body, just nerves, like a thought preserved in muscle. That's when the tapping stopped for 6 weeks silence. Then one day, it resumed, this time only once. 7 taps, a pause, then a low sustained tone that rose in frequency for 17 seconds. And in that tone, another pattern. When filtered through a harmonic converter, the waveform drew a spiral. That spiral, but inverted, curving inward, then vanishing at the center. They tested different frequencies in the area, played artificial patterns back, tried to mimic the taps. The sea didn't respond, not immediately. But the third time they sent down a pulse, something answered. Not a tap, a knock, loud enough to register on every hydrophone for 800 miles. One knock, and with it came pressure, sudden, intense, localized. The research vessel rose 6 inches out of the water. The sea around them went flat. No wind, no swell, just an unnatural stillness like a breath held too long. Then the sky flickered, not lightning, not aurora. A blink, like the atmosphere itself had lost focus. When it cleared, the water had changed color just for a second. A dull crimson sheen washed across the surface like ink, and then it was gone. Just static again, just the tapping. Historians still debate the origin of the sounds. Some say they're leftover Cold War experiments. Others believe deep-sea vents might release trapped gases that produce harmonic vibrations. But those theories don't explain the knock, or the shapes, or why after the incident, every compass within 10 miles pointed downward for 6 hours. One theory remains unspoken in official circles, that the tapping is a test, not a message, not a signal, but a question. And when we answer incorrectly, the ocean remembers. There's a record of an early Japanese submarine in 1944 that went silent near these same waters. No wreckage was ever found, but fragments of its final log survived. One entry reads, "We hear knocking on the hull, like small bones, asking to come in." Another says, "Sound comes from beneath the ballast. 7 knocks, then breath. Then we forget our names." That was the final entry. Now, as you hover above the site, the water is calm, but beneath you, faint, soft, you hear it. 1, 2, 3, 7, then quiet. You wait 9 seconds, then again 7 taps, and you know, somewhere below, something is listening. Not waiting for help, not seeking answers, just checking to see if anyone still remembers the question. You close your eyes, and the knock comes, just once, deep, final, not an invitation, a reminder. It's not supposed to be there, tucked between 2 underwater ridges in the South Atlantic, where currents churn and sediments settle. there's a valley. Unremarkable, quiet, lifeless. Until you turn on the lights. That's when the shadows stop behaving. It's been named the mirrored trench, though nothing in it reflects. Not visibly, not like glass. It's more of a feeling, like light is being remembered wrong. Shapes blur, angles shift, cameras capture things you didn't see. And what you did see, gone when you look again. The trench isn't deep, only about 400 meters, but no one has reached the bottom. Not really, because the trench moves, not geographically, not in depth. It moves in time. The first clue was a timestamp error. A drone sent into the valley disappeared from feed for 20 minutes. When it reappeared, it was exactly where it had been before vanishing. Same location, same depth, but the footage had changed. The timestamp was now 42 minutes ahead of the present, and the drone's external casing had aged. Mild corrosion, scratches, a bent fin, all signs of wear it shouldn't have had, not in 90 minutes of operation. But then they checked the internal clock. It read a full week later, as if the drone had spent 7 days somewhere else and then been returned to its point of origin with a helpful edit to the logs. They sent a human diver next, monitored, tethered, tracked. He descended, entered the trench, and went silent. For 4 minutes, nothing, then static. Then he resurfaced alone, the tether still intact but empty. He swam up himself calmly, pulled his own mask off, sat on the deck, and whispered, "That wasn't my reflection." When pressed, he couldn't explain. He didn't remember diving. He said the water felt reversed, that when he kicked it, felt like something else kicked back. Later, while reviewing footage of his descent, they noticed his eyes looked wrong. No dilation, no reaction to light. And for 6 frames, one pupil was shaped like a spiral. He had no memory of the dive, but he kept a small piece of coral in his hand the whole time. Only, it wasn't coral. Biologists couldn't identify it. The structure was too perfect crystalline, but warm. It pulsed faintly in UV light. They broke it open in a sterile lab. Inside was a tiny pearl, but it wasn't round. It was shaped like a vertebra. They stopped testing after that. Historians and oceanographers debated whether the trench is a natural magnetic distortion or a temporal anomaly, perhaps a place where space-time has folded so many times that the ocean simply misremembers itself. Some call it an echo chamber, others a gate. There are old myths of mirrored lakes' waters that didn't reflect the sky, but instead showed alternate worlds. Maybe this trench is the sea's attempt at the same trick. A mirror that doesn't reflect light but possibility. One theory suggests that the trench is not looking up at us. It's looking down, judging, and when it sees something it likes, it keeps a copy. That would explain the ghost footage. Frames that appeared days after a dive. Images showing divers who never entered the trench. People looking into the camera and smiling, but their faces were subtly wrong, off, tilted at odd angles, eyes set a little too far apart, teeth too smooth, and behind them, a dark wet surface, smooth and curved, as if filmed from inside something, a sphere maybe, or an eye. One researcher who reviewed too much of the footage stopped talking altogether. She now draws loops, endless overlapping loops. When asked why, she simply writes, "It's mapping me. Now you hover above the mirrored trench, the water glassy, still, and quiet. You feel the urge to look down, but something in your mind hesitates. Because what if your reflection isn't really yours? What if it's a draft version? Or worse, what if it's the final one, and you are the copy?" You blink. The sea blinks back, and far below, in that shallow, forgotten valley, something gleams for a split second. Not light, not shadow, just you, but not watching and waiting to take your place. It's one of the quietest places in the ocean, not because there's nothing there, but because it removes sound, actively, aggressively, like a predator consuming echoes. They call it the mute zone, located in the Southern Ocean, where the water gets colder than logic and the winds scream across unbroken waves. There's a pocket of sea where everything goes silent, not just above water, but below. The moment you cross the threshold, it's like someone hit mute on the whole planet. No hum of engines, no click of sonar, no thump of heartbeat in your ears, just absence. Sound is still created, but it doesn't go anywhere. It stops, dead. When hydrophones are lowered into the zone, they work for a moment. Then the feed flatlines, not from damage, not from signal loss, just nothing. But when you pull the equipment back up, it works fine again. It's not the devices, it's the place. The first people to report it were fishermen in the 1950s. They spoke of dead water, where engines sputtered and voices faded into wool. Some claimed they could scream and not hear themselves. They were laughed off until a deep-sea microphone array installed by a French research ship went offline for 46 minutes. When the feed resumed, it played back nothing. No static, no failure beeps, just a perfect digital silence. Except hidden at the end of the file was one sound, one word, whispered, "Listen." The crew denied ever recording it. They checked logs. No one had spoken. No other ships nearby. The voice wasn't male or female. Just there, dry as dust, soft as a paper cut. That section of the ocean was marked unstable, but divers kept going. One described it like swimming through a vacuum bag. Not pressure, not fear, just pure detachment from vibration. Another reported that for 10 full minutes, he heard nothing, but thoughts got louder, not his own. Other thoughts, he said, like someone thinking me into place. They tested acoustic beacons, emergency pings. None made it past a 300-meter radius. But sometimes, if you stood still, you could hear breathing. Not human, something deeper, slower, drawn-out inhales that bent the current ever so slightly. And sometimes, in that mute dark, the divers would describe something worse. Echoes of things they hadn't said yet, like the zone could hear thoughts before they formed. Historians and physicists argue endlessly about how it works. One theory is a mineral deposit on the seafloor, some rare arrangement of elements that absorbs or refracts sound in new ways. Another suggests thermal layering so extreme that it warps acoustics entirely. But neither explains the whispers, nor the dreams. Divers who returned from the mute zone often experienced prolonged insomnia, not from fear, from overstimulation. Their brains wouldn't quiet down. They heard their own breath too loudly. Their footsteps became thunder. Their pulse was unbearable. One man blocked his ears with wax and cotton. Still, he heard a voice. One word, "Come." They placed him under observation. He wrote obsessively in a journal. Only 3 words. Still, listening, below. The phrase became a warning, a slogan, a superstition among sailors. Still, listening, below. They speak it before passing near the zone. Some whisper it like a prayer. Others refuse to say it at all. The strangest discovery came from an autonomous float drone left in the zone for 6 weeks. When recovered, the drone's data was empty, except for one recording, a human heartbeat, slow, steady, and too deep to belong to anyone on the team. It wasn't just low in frequency, it was large, as if whatever it came from was massive and waiting. Now, as you hover above this pocket of deathless silence, you become aware of your own noises, your breath, your heartbeat, the subtle creak in your neck as you tilt downward, then nothing. The sea around you tightens, like a room with too much insulation. You try to swallow, and even that sounds distant. And then nothing. But you feel something, not pressure, presence, a sense that something vast is just beneath you, not speaking, not moving, just waiting for everything to quiet down so it can be heard. In the silence, your thoughts slow. They echo. Once, then again, and you hear it not with your ears, but with your memory. Still, listening, below. It began as a shadow on a satellite image, a curious swirl beneath the surface far out in the South Pacific, in waters untouched by shipping lanes or research expeditions. Just a curve, nothing dramatic, but perfect. Too perfect. It looked like a whirlpool, but whirlpools don't stay frozen in place for weeks. Scientists reviewed the data. The pattern didn't move with the current. It didn't grow or shrink. It stayed locked in a precise spiral, like a fingerprint pressed into the ocean itself. They sent a probe. It disappeared. Not violently, not even suddenly. It just stopped reporting. No signal, no wreckage. Just one last ping frozen mid-transmission. A few years passed. Then, another satellite captured the same spiral again, this time 50 miles east. Exactly the same shape, exactly the same size. That's when the rumors started. And the name stuck. The spiral pool. It's not always visible. Sometimes it only shows up as a distortion in water temperature or a slight discoloration. Other times the sky above it darkens for no reason, clouds gathering in silent formation without pressure systems to explain them. The pattern always appears at sea level, but never affects the waves. The water moves, but the spiral stays. Like it's not part of the ocean, but something beneath it. Or worse, something that projects itself upward through the water, like a signal escaping containment. One sailor claimed to have seen it up close. He'd been stranded, adrift for 4 days, when the clouds parted and the sea around him went completely still. Then suddenly the water shifted. Not down, not up, but sideways. He looked over the edge of his raft and saw the spiral turning gently gracefully, like a spool unwinding. And in the center, a shape, round, pale. Too large to be a fish, too smooth to be a whale. He said it looked like a lid, and he got the distinct feeling something was about to lift it. He passed out before it moved. When he woke, his raft was 3 miles away. No memory of drifting, no wind, no current, just distance. Later, researchers mapped the coordinates and found nothing unusual, except, of course, the pattern. Again, sonar scans failed. The signal always bounced away at the wrong angles, as if the water itself was lying. And then there were the voices. Several hydrophone stations monitoring the region picked up strange interference during spiral appearances, snatches of garbled phrases, some mechanical, others oddly emotional. One recording caught a single word clear and slow. Return. When slowed further, the word echoed 3 times each one in a slightly different tone, like a chorus, speaking across layers of time. Experts couldn't explain it. Linguists identified no known language base. Audio specialists found no matching waveform. And yet, it was human. Definitely human. Historians still debate the meaning of the spiral pool. Some say it's an ancient mechanism, something left behind by a forgotten civilization waiting to activate. Others believe it's not a thing at all, but a mouth, the opening of something massive turned sideways in space, slowly rotating its attention toward the surface. And then there's the theory passed between sailors in low tones that the spiral isn't a place, it's a memory, a point in the sea where time loops over itself, where something that happened long ago keeps happening again and again, replaying like a record stuck on a single haunting phrase. Return. One research vessel dropped a dye pack into the center of the spiral, bright red, designed to show flow patterns. It vanished in seconds, not dispersed, not diluted, just gone. But 23 hours later, a fishing trawler 400 miles west found something slick on their nets. Red dye, still vibrant, still wet, still warm. No explanation. No current travels that direction. No vortex exists in that part of the sea. The dye had moved against the ocean itself, as if obeying a different kind of current. Some divers volunteered to go in. Only one made it through. She swam down, clipped to a line. Her voice calm. Descriptions clinical. Then silence. Her oxygen levels dropped. No panic, no struggle, just stillness. The line went slack. When they pulled it back, she was gone, except her dive computer, still recording. The final log entry, it opened. They don't dive there anymore. Now, as you float above the coordinates, the sea is motionless. But below something curves. You can't see it, not with your eyes, but in your gut, in that low primal part of you built for caves and tigers, you feel it, turning, watching, unwinding. You close your eyes, and for one moment the world tilts. You see the ocean from above, from high, high above, and in it the spiral glows. Not light, not heat, memory. It's calling something back. Maybe you, off the coast of Antarctica, where the sun barely rises and the winds bite through steel. There is a place known only by those who don't speak of it twice. They call it the Black Shelf. It doesn't appear on maps, not because it's hidden, but because it's been erased deliberately. Satellite images glitch. Sonar skips. GPS signals twist into nonsense. If you try to chart a course toward it, your instruments begin to lie. But those who've been there, remember, it's a stretch of shelf ice that seems to go on forever until it doesn't. The shelf ends not with a gradual slope, not with a crack, but with a sheer drop into open water. A perfect black line where the ice cuts off and the sea takes over deeper than the Mariana, darker than midnight. And what lies beyond it, a circle, a perfect one, roughly 2 miles wide. This circle is etched into the ocean itself, its edges unnaturally smooth, like something vast once pressed down on the sea and left an imprint. But the most terrifying thing, the water doesn't move inside it. Waves form but never enter. Wind touches but doesn't disturb. It's like the sea itself pauses there. One vessel approached the circle in 2013. They'd been mapping ice decay when the instruments began to fail. Magnetometers reversed, polarity, compasses spun, radios screamed with static. And then, the stillness. The ship coasted to a stop, not because the engines died, but because something held it. The sea beneath them was like obsidian, reflective, endless, and something was looking back. Divers were sent in. 2 went below. Only 1 came back. He didn't speak for hours. When he did, all he said was, "There's no bottom, just a face." He was asked to explain. He drew a spiral, then a circle, then a slit, like a closed eye. Then he put down the pen and walked off the ship into the snow, never seen again. The recovered footage from the dive shows what appears to be a smooth surface, impossibly smooth some 300 feet below the water. It isn't rock. It isn't ice. It looks like skin, dark, pliable, breathing. At one point, the lights from the submersible flicker. And when they return, everything has moved slightly. Not the divers, not the ship, the entire trench. The circle had shifted, but the coordinates were the same. Like the sea had stayed still, and the world had rotated around it. Scientists called it a feedback loop. Sailors called it an eye. And when one brave idiot suggested dropping an anchor into it, the rope paid out smoothly for 20 minutes before stopping. No tension, no bounce, just a soft stop. And when they pulled the rope back, it was wet, but not with seawater, sticky, like blood that's been underwater for a long, long time. Historians still argue what the black shelf really is: a rift, a scar, a socket. Some say the Earth once saw something, and this was the price. Others claim it's a memory, a preserved moment from a time before time when the ocean still had rules, and those rules had names. But one theory lingers and whispers that this circle is not dead. It is dreaming, and every ripple around its edge is a twitch, not random, not meaningless, a reflex. And if you stay too long, if you listen too hard, you start to dream with it. You begin to forget where you came from. You feel drawn downward, not in fear, not even in fascination, but in a kind of yearning, like a song calling you home in a language you've never heard. And every fiber of your being tells you this is where the end begins. Now you hover above that place. The black shelf yawns below, flat as a mirror, still as death. You feel your thoughts slow. You imagine diving. You feel what it would be like to drift downward through that glassy ring, to brush your fingertips against the surface that is not water, not ice, not flesh, but something else, something vast enough to forget its own body, something ancient enough to blink once every 1,000 years. You wonder, if you swam far enough down, would you reach its pupil? Would it see you? Would it wake up? But then a current brushes your ankle. The spell breaks. The shelf waits. Still, for now, it's not the cold that gets you. It's the sound of clocks ticking underwater, even when you're not wearing one. Even when there's no ship, no sub, no tech around at all. They call it the clock field, and it lies deep in the Arctic basin, beneath a stretch of sea so unwelcoming that only satellite-guided research missions dare venture there. It's surrounded by nothing but cold silence and a kind of waiting that no one can quite describe. But inside the zone, every diver reports the same thing: the distinct, rhythmic tick-tick-tick of a clock. Not loud, not close, just present. At first, researchers assumed it was a psychological phenomenon, an auditory hallucination caused by pressure or isolation. But then they recorded it. Hydrophones set in the field picked up the ticking loud and clear. 12 ticks, 1 pause, 12 again, each set precisely 0.86 seconds apart, not exactly matching any known terrestrial timekeeping system, but close. And every time the ticks loop back, the magnetic field in the area fluctuates just slightly, enough to register, enough to destabilize instruments. The readings suggest a pulsing sphere of energy that expands and contracts with the rhythm, like a mechanical heartbeat. One submersible sent to the site developed a strange data glitch. The onboard computer kept renaming the dive files with dates from the 1800s. Different days, different years, but all of them in reverse order, counting down. To what? That's what no one knows. The first human diver who reached the core of the clock field described a feeling of time slowing down, not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. He said his limbs resisted movement like he was swimming through syrup. His thoughts lagged. His eyes saw movement, but his brain processed it seconds later. At one point, he looked at his own hands, and they weren't moving at all. They were still, frozen mid-motion, but he could still think, still feel. He panicked, but couldn't scream, couldn't thrash. He said time broke me. They pulled him up. The dive took 6 minutes, but the oxygen log said he'd used 42 minutes worth. And his dive watch, it was 3 hours ahead. One researcher theorized that the zone exists at a fold in space-time where a small constant anomaly disrupts linear flow. Not a time machine exactly, but a clock out of sync with everything else. Some say it's a remnant of Earth's creation, a bruise in the fabric of reality where the laws of chronology failed to solidify, a place where time has leaked. Others whisper that it's not a place at all. It's a mechanism, a clock that counts not hours or days, but awakenings, 1 tick per approach, 1 tick per watcher. And when the hands complete their silent revolution, something begins again. In 2019, a probe returned from the clock field with external markings carved into its titanium shell. No creature could have done it. The scratches were precise, deliberate. 12 symbols, arranged in a circle, each one a spiral slightly different, as if captured mid-spin. One physicist stared at it for hours, then whispered, "It's a countdown." Since then, the ticking has intensified. The intervals shortened by nanoseconds every year, barely measurable. But it's happening, and the magnetic pulses grow stronger, now capable of disrupting drones, stalling compasses, even interfering with satellite positioning. One ship attempting to anchor nearby found itself drifting in a perfect circle for 17 hours. No current, no wind, just orbit. And at the center of that invisible spiral, silence, where no clock ticks, where nothing moves. One diver claims to have seen something there. Not a creature, not a light, a machine. He described it as a spindle, carved into the seafloor, unmoving, monumental, coated in ice that never melted, no matter how warm the surrounding water got. It didn't spin, it didn't hum, but he swore it was the source, the engine of the clock. The moment he approached, the ticking stopped. For the first time in history, complete silence. He touched the spindle. It was warm. He blacked out. They found him, floating at the surface, teeth, chattering eyes wide. He said one thing before falling unconscious. It knows we're late. No one has reached the spindle again. The sea doesn't allow it. Storms appear instantly. Ice forms on sensors. And always the ticking resumes. 12 beats, 1 pause, over and over. Historians still debate whether the clock field marks the beginning of something or the end. Now you drift above it. The water beneath you is still, but in your chest, you feel the rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Not a sound, a pressure, a reminder that time isn't just a measurement. It's a boundary. And in this place, the boundary is thin. You exhale, 12 breaths, 1 pause, and for just a moment, it feels like you're being counted, not watched, not hunted, measured, and the clock is still ticking. For now, sometimes the sea isn't deep enough to hide what it remembers. In a shallow stretch off the coast of Namibia, there's a place where no sand sticks, no coral grows, no wreckage lasts. Just flat exposed seafloor, barren, smooth, unnatural. Divers call it the clean circle. Roughly 200 meters wide and perfectly round the circle appears in satellite photos as a slightly lighter patch of ocean. But when you get closer, the water above, it goes glassy. Wind dies, birds vanish, and the ocean starts to feel like a closed room with no doors. The first dive there was in the 1980s. A pair of marine biologists looking to collect sponge samples. They dropped anchor just outside the circle and swam in on foot. They expected sediment silt marine growth. What they found was stone, flat stone, smooth stone, not rock, not coral, not natural reef. Laid stone, like tiles, hundreds of them, each about a meter wide, arranged in a spiral that tightened toward the center. They couldn't explain it. No known geological event lays rock like that. No civilization is known to have built anything in that region, especially underwater, especially to that scale. But there it was, carved patterns along the edges, faint glyphs, repeating marks that didn't match any writing system. Just endless loops, interlocking. A language without letters. And at the center of the spiral, a basin, perfectly round, shallow, empty. Like something used to sit there, or something should. They took photos. They took samples. But when they surfaced, their equipment had failed. The photos were corrupted. The samples had dissolved. Stone turned to powder. Powder turned to salt. Only their memories remained. But even those began to shift. Within weeks, the divers reported dreams. Not nightmares. Rehearsals. They described the same dream, standing in the circle barefoot, while water drained away in slow spirals. Above them, a structure hovered, huge, silent, rimmed with lights. Not a UFO, not mechanical, something older. And watching them from its underside rows of shapes, some looked like people, some didn't. Each diver painted the same image weeks apart, having not spoken to each other. The clean circle was closed off by the Namibian government shortly after. No official explanation, just silence. But that didn't stop others. Freelance divers, treasure hunters, thrill seekers. Few came back. Those who did came back changed. One man lost the ability to recognize his own face in mirrors. Another began reciting strings of numbers in his sleep, always 31 digits long. When plotted on a map, the numbers formed a spiral one that matched the layout of the circle exactly. A spiral of memory. Historians speculate it may have been a ritual site, some long-lost civilizations offering ground. But there are no ruins nearby, no artifacts, nothing else at all. Just the circle and the absence of time inside it. One diver claimed her watch froze the moment she stepped in, not stopped, froze. When she left the circle, it resumed as if nothing had happened. She was under for 40 minutes. Her dive computer registered 6, and the footage from her helmet camera, 30 minutes of staring into a still black basin, her own reflection watching her, except she wasn't moving. And her reflection was smiling. They say the circle is expanding now, only by centimeters, but growing. Each year, more of the surrounding seafloor falls quiet. Fish avoid it. Currents slow. Like the ocean is holding its breath around that perfect disk. One satellite image showed a ripple, a single wave moving outward from the circle's center. Just one. Then nothing. The next day, 4 boys went missing from the region. Gone. Ropes snapped clean. No storm. No warning. Now, as you drift above the circle, you feel it in your bones. Not pressure. Stillness. A complete, deliberate absence. The water around you is warmer than it should be. The sky overhead seems to lean in. And beneath you, the spiral waits, carved into the stone, etched into the memory of the sea. You could dive now. You'd reach the basin in minutes, touch the center, see what the sea is keeping so clean. But you don't. Because in the silence, you feel it. Not something waking up, something already awake, watching. Always has been. And it's not angry. It's just ready. It was supposed to be a simple survey. A university team cataloging sediment layers near the Azores, using low-frequency sonar to chart changes in underwater topography. Routine, boring, predictable, until the sonar returned a shape, a perfect cube, buried just beneath the seafloor aligned with true north. Its edges measured exactly 22 meters equal on all sides without erosion or distortion. The angles were precise, too precise, not rock, not coral, not natural. They named it the cube beneath. At first, they assumed a sunken structure, perhaps a remnant of ancient maritime activity or some forgotten outpost from a lost age. But core samples brought up nothing but dust, metallic fine and strangely warm. And then the dream started. One researcher, who hadn't even gone down in the sub, reported visions of walls made of silver black stone covered in thousands of tiny carvings, each a different spiral. She said the cube was alive, though not in the way people are. It's thinking, she said. Not now, not here, elsewhere. When the team returned to the coordinates the next day, the cube was gone, not moved, gone. The sonar returned, no shape, no signal. The seafloor showed no disturbance until they adjusted their frequency. At exactly 5.6, barely above seismic detection, a shadow appeared. The cube was still there, just phased, like a ghost embedded in the crust of the earth. They sent another sub. This time, it didn't come back. The last few seconds of footage showed the seafloor parting, not cracking, not breaking opening. A slit forming in the sand. A line of unnatural darkness, then a rush of water inward. Then the feed went black. The tether returned, snapped, scorched, and vibrating. The vessel had disappeared, but 3 hours later, a capsule floated to the surface. Inside was a single photograph, not digital, not printed, not developed, just present. A picture of the cube, but not underwater, sitting in a vast plain under a red sky, and surrounding it a ring of shapes, tall, thin, unmoving, watching. The image degraded rapidly once open, but the spiral in the corner remained, etched into the material like a watermark. It spun counterclockwise. No one could explain how a cube could exist simultaneously across layers of matter. No one could explain why it reappeared at 5.6 hertz and only at night, but the data held consistently. And when exposed to that frequency, things happened. Light distorted, mirrors warped, and more photographs appeared. In places no one expected. Inside, sealed cameras, etched into laptop screens. One drone captured a reflection of something massive below the cube, a foundation that extended far, far deeper than the crust should allow. They began calling it the root, a black stalk descending into unknown depths, not built, grown, as if the cube wasn't the structure, just the blossom. Historians scrambled for comparisons. Some cited ancient stories, black cubes worshipped by long-lost tribes, tales of stone sentinels appearing in the sea and vanishing again. Others said it resembled burial practices, a coffin, or a cornerstone, a marker left behind after something was removed. But the most compelling theory, that the cube is a memory device, not for storage, for broadcast, not transmitting outward, inward. Some believe it sends signals through the Earth's own resonance, that it hums at a frequency meant to awaken something not in space, but in us. Because those who spend too long near it begin to change. They forget words. They lose track of time. They draw spirals and condensation on glass, in dust, on dashboards, on their own arms. And they hear one word just before sleep. Repeat. One diver was found 40 miles from the site, drifting without gear. She spoke in her sleep, over and over. Not built, remembered. Now you float above the point on the map where the cube once sat. The water is still, but beneath you sonar would show a flicker, a shadow box in the crust. And if you hum very softly at 5.6 hertz, you'll feel it. A tug, not on your body, on your thoughts. A sense of folding inward, of cycling back, of spirals. And deep below, something listens, not the cube, the root. It's still growing, and it remembers you, even if you've never been here before. They warned not to talk about it at sea. Old sailors, the ones with knotted hands and eyes like weathered glass, said the name too many times, and the ocean would hear you. They whispered it under their breath behind closed doors, always followed by silence. They called it the last tide, not a wave, not a current, not even a storm, just a rising, not of water, but of memory. It began off the coast of Chile, after a fishing vessel reported a sudden rise in sea level just 2 feet over the course of 20 minutes. Then it receded. No rain, no moon shift, no geological activity, just up and then down. 3 days later, another ship recorded the same thing 300 miles away, up then down. But this time the water changed. When sampled, it wasn't seawater. It was ancient, chemically distinct, with properties matching fossilized oceans from over 500 million years ago. Oceans that no longer exist from a world long buried beneath layers of extinction. Historians were baffled, oceanographers confused, and then the buoy blinked. A satellite-tracked buoy designed to bob gently in place vanished from GPS. Then 7 minutes later it reappeared, 10 feet away, not drifting, reappearing. The team retrieved it. The data on board showed something impossible. For 7 minutes, it had been floating in an ocean, with stars beneath it, not a reflection. Actual stars, recorded somehow from below the surface. Constellations from Earth's past, sky before axial drift, before modern charts. Before us, they began calling the area a temporal loop, a fracture, a wrinkle in the sea, where time pulled in all directions. But as it kept happening over and over, to ships, to fish, to instruments, it stopped feeling like a loop. It felt like a tide, and it was getting higher. Every few days, the ocean around the zone would rise again. 1 foot, then 2, then 3. Not globally, just there, like something below was displacing water. Slowly, carefully, and the creatures changed. First, it was plankton species thought extinct since the Cambrian, then jellyfish with translucent bones, eels with gills shaped like spirals. Then came the whales, but not ours. Whales with eyes that glowed. That swam in perfect hexagonal formations. That didn't breathe. One breached near a naval vessel. Its skin shimmered like oil on water. Its mouth never opened, but every person on board heard the same word inside their head, home. Then it vanished beneath the waves. No sound, just a low hum that stayed in the bones. They say the tide is rising again now, that somewhere out there, the ocean is preparing to spill over, not onto land, but onto reality, to flood not our cities, but our histories. Because what's surfacing isn't water. It's the past, rewritten, woken up, refreshed like a file recovered from an old rusted drive. One diver described standing on the ocean floor and suddenly feeling unalone. Not watched, not touched, just remembered, like the ocean had once known her long ago in another shape, and now it had recognized her return. She cried, not from fear, from recognition. The last tide, they say, isn't destruction. It's restoration, a resetting of time's eroded loops. A moment when the ocean spills backward, reclaiming the future and all its cracks. And in the center of it all, where the water feels oldest, thickest, most alive, they found it. A tower, not above the surface, below, rising from the trench like a spine layered in stone and flesh, and something that glowed. It had no doors, no windows, just a slit at the top, and sound. Not noise, song. Slow, mournful notes that seemed to play through the water, not into it. Each tone a spiral, each spiral a memory, and each memory a key. Now, as you float above the region, the water feels dense, not heavier, just deeper than it should be. You exhale, the tide pulses, and you wonder, if it rises one more time, will it bring something up, or will it pull you down? You listen, and beneath you, for the first time, the sea doesn't whisper. It speaks, return, then silence, and the water rises. You're still here, somehow, after drifting through vanished ships, echoing spirals, sleeping titans, and voices that speak in tides. You've stayed afloat, rocking gently above the world's oldest secrets. Let it settle in. The darkness beneath you now feels less like emptiness and more like memory. A place not just full of unanswered questions, but one made of them. Whispers that don't need mouths. Machinery that runs on time and salt. Creatures with no names and oceans that fold around what doesn't want to be seen. You didn't just explore shipwrecks and sonar blips. You visited thresholds, skin-thin barriers between what is and what was and maybe what will be again. Remember the chain that disappeared into the trench, the voice that counted in knocks, the perfect archway that felt like it dreamed. They weren't just stories. They were patterns, echoes, reminders that we are guests here, that beneath our floating cities, leisure cruises, and satellites, there's a world that never stopped being strange. It's been waiting not for us to explain it, but for us to listen. Maybe not everything under the sea is dead or dormant. Maybe some of it remembers the first breath of Earth, the first pulse, the shape of time before clocks. And maybe when the tide rises that last time, it won't wash us away in punishment. It will simply return us to something older than fear, older than memory, something that still sings softly, slowly, in every spiral shell, in every lull of the waves. Now turn over. Let the hum settle into your ribs. Let the sea cradle your thoughts like driftwood. Whatever waits below, it's not in a rush. It has all the time in the world. So rest easy now. You're part of the ocean's story, and it never forgets.